let's do it. The second was right there before her was an example that, yeah, this works. My dad's the king of the world skateboarder. So I have a belief that it will work. And the last was the most important, and that was he just kept repeating one instruction, and that was go forward. Don't try to balance back on your heels, just go forward. I feel like we've stagnated with a couple of things, and we need to decide what it is that we believe in, that we have some vision of success of, and go for it. We got to go forward. We got to stop dragging it back on our heels and trying to balance, or we're just going to fall on our butts. So that's my thought for the evening, and then I'll just offer a quick prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're grateful this night to come before Thee as a city council. We're grateful for the many blessings that we have as a city. We're grateful for the wonderful environment we have. We're grateful for the moisture we've enjoyed this season. We're grateful for the good people who are here, and we pray that we'll be able to represent them with sincere hearts this evening and do our best to make decisions that will benefit them. We ask Thee for guidance in all of that we do, and we ask for the protection over those in this city and the businesses that serve here and all those associated, that we will be prosperous and blessed with opportunities. And we say this humbly in the name of Thy Son, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, David. We might mention for the residents who are here, or those that have interest in this meeting, that Councilwoman Bolduc, hello Corinne, is joining us in Orlando, Florida. She is on the mosquito abatement with the mosquito abatement district, and she's back there attending a conference so she can come back and teach us about mosquitoes. So Corinne, I'm glad you're here. We enjoy your input. We at each of our meetings allow some time for public comment. We subscribe as a council. We have adopted Robert's Rules of Order in relationship to help manage our meetings, and so we will be using those rules tonight as we conduct the business. However, we would like to hear from the residents or those that have things that they would like to share with the council. We would invite you to just notice yourself to me that you would like to speak. We would ask you to give your name and your place of residence for the record. This meeting is being broadcast and will be recorded and become part of our minutes. What you say will become part of the history of Syracuse. And we would, for purposes of managing the meeting, we'd limit your items to 3 minutes at a piece. So if there is anybody who would like to address the council on any topic, we would welcome those comments now.
May I ask, are you saying just anything or when you reach?
No, there will be no discussion when we reach a topic.
Okay.
If you have something that you'd like to say on a topic, you need to speak it now.
Okay, well, I know I'm one of them, so I carry you
Yeah, I would like to take a few minutes here.
State your name, sir.
Oh, Terry Palmer, Syracuse, Utah. So I happen to be in conversation with a resident here that I was referred to talk about purchasing a piece of property. And after I was talking to him, found out that he had been offered way more money than I felt like the property was worth. And so I said, well, what's going on here? And he said, well, I found out if I get 5 acres together, then I can build a bunch of townhouses. So, and this is in an R1 zone. So I don't know what validity there is to this conversation. But my point is that we struggled 5 years ago, with PRDs just sent anywhere within the city. I think there were like 4 different ones that we took out. I noticed that Mr. Wilcox is here, and we just had the battle, on one that he owned the property on and so forth, and we worked out a great deal on that.
Good resolution.
Yeah. So my point that I'm getting at here is that I think we're at 5 houses per acre, or 5 units per acre at this point in time. I really hope and pray that we will stay at that number, you know, not go into the 12 or 13 units that we had before. On an acre, I do believe that we can comply with Envision Utah requirements without having to go into building a high capacity of homes and so forth, you know, within Syracuse here. I do believe that we have a great community here. I think we can keep it that way, but if we start putting in massive apartment buildings or things like that, or massive amounts of townhouses, condos, I think that would destroy what we have built in Syracuse. So I would recommend that the city look at that and stay where we're at.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, sir.
My name is Chris Frazier. I live at 1475 South Ruby Way in Banbury. I am and have been notified of the PRD changes to the Eric Craythorne property that is close to my home. I also own the piece of property just east of Eric Craythorne's property, 1558 South, 1700 West, Syracuse. A couple of concerns I have. Spent a number of years on the Planning Commission years ago. I understand how that map was drawn right there and what it was drawn for. It seems that the city of Syracuse continues to lose its retail or general plan retail spaces. And I got a feeling that there is a tax increase coming from this body in the next year or two that will scare the citizens of Syracuse. We're not focused. Citizens of Syracuse City is not business friendly, or it doesn't appear to be. And so there is no retail business coming to Syracuse. It's all going to Clinton. It's been proven by the city of Leagues or the city of Towns and Leagues that you cannot run a city on the tax base, run homes, period. We have to have the retail in here. Okay? We're losing our retail. Now, you want to take away another piece of retail property, a property that has been identified on the general plan as general commercial, with the property on that Mr. Eric Craythorne owns at 1700 South and up Banbury. A couple of issues with that I have. First off, the PRD, if you take it up and you guys decide to put more homes on there, where are you going to put the traffic? Banbury was built as an artery, and I recognize that. It is a main collector, and recognized as a main collector in the city and on the city plans. However, with the addition of, or the widening of Antelope Drive at Banbury, and UDOT's infinite wisdom in putting a curb just west of Banbury, makes that intersection very nasty. A lot of traffic on Banbury now. So if you want to plan on dumping traffic out of Mr. Craythorne's property onto Banbury, there's going to be a problem. Okay? Here again, back to my original concern. Why are we continuing to move off or sell off our general commercial property for more townhomes when it will not continue to support the city of Syracuse? Okay? We're already missing things on our general plan that aren't getting done now. The roads are not getting surfaced. Infrastructure is not being taken care of. And we continue to lose sales tax dollars. R.C. Willis is leaving. Smith's will be next in 2 years when that lease is up. What are we going to do in the city for more tax dollars? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
First, before you start my 3 minutes, I have a little bit of a gripe on the Planning Commission meeting that we attended last month.
Your time is starting now.
Well, let's just do it then, because I've got what I'm going to say what I'm going to say, because I was extremely insulted by a comment that was made by the, I don't remember the gentleman's name.
The Planning Commission chairman.
The chairman. After we had all gone through everything, including Mr. Craythorne, he kind of laughed. There's a little discussion, and then the comment was made, well, this probably ought to be as easy enough as a coin toss under the table. I didn't find that funny. This is very serious to Mr. Craythorne as it is to the Banbury subdivision. That needs to be addressed. On top of that, my name's Christy Frazier, I'm sorry. Same house as this guy, 1475 South Ruby Way. I have done a little bit of a study of my own on the traffic that we do have. It was done last month. I sat out on a corner of 1500 and Banbury Drive, between 8:25 and 8:55. This was a Monday. We had, in the first 10 minutes, 27 cars total go through. 20 residents, 7 going into the park to drop kids off for school and to come back out. Within 30 minutes, total of 91 cars, 63 residential, 28 going into the school. That afternoon, I finally quit counting when it hit over 40 cars in 20 minutes, going in to drop off the kids to the school. Partly of that reason is because I know that the parking lot was redone at the school and it's a mess over there. I should know, I work there. It increases drastically when the youth games are going on in the parks. Heritage Days, some of you who live in there know what I'm talking about. It's a joke in the neighborhood. Traffic is horrible. I would ask that you please require a traffic study to be done on Banbury Drive. And I don't know what UDOT will require on 1700, but I think it does need to be addressed with them. If this property does get approved, it really needs 2 outlets. We understand the one on Banbury is one and the curb has been cut to go in, but out onto 1700, which I know with UDOT, they're just really fun to work with on these things. It needs to be considered. We are looking at the safety of kids and those of us trying to get out. As you look at this map, the road does curve. Trying to get out of Banbury and going left, you look to the right, you've got poles standing there. You can't tell what car those lanes are in until you've pulled out. And sometimes it's a holy moment when you realize a car was in a lane that you didn't think. So I'm seeing some nodding of their head, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't understand what I'm saying, I strongly recommend that each and of you come over during our high traffic times and just check it out for yourself. If you want, I also recorded what was going on there so you don't think I'm just somebody who's freaking out over traffic. It's all right here. So with that, I just hope you'll listen to me and not toss a coin underneath the table and make a decision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to address the council? We also, before we close this evening, we'll open again for public comment. Hearing and seeing none, I'll close that part of our agenda. Thank you for your input. We've taken notes. We appreciate your input. Item number C, review of the 2019 interlocal agreement regarding animal control. Is that you, Brody? Garrett, is that you?
Wherever you want. You can come up front. You can go up front if you want. Or here.
Walk the camera.
Wherever you want.
So this is the same concept that we go over every year when we renew the animal control interlocal agreement. So just some of the backstory on this. The current method with the county was signed off in 2016, and this is basically just the piece that comes in every single year to override the previous year's portion of their cost that they transfer to the city. So they bill these on a calendar year schedule. The costs are broken down and we pay a portion to them every single month. You'll see in the documentation how they break these down as far as their costs, and that the city is basically responsible for 50% of those projected costs after you subtract whatever revenue they bring in. So on this year's term, which will, sorry, one more year. In this year's term, our total amount went to just under $82,000, which was about a 21% increase over what we paid the previous calendar year. I asked Rhett, Rhett? Okay, I hadn't had a chance to meet him yet. So Rhett's the director of animal control. He provided us some information in the packet again about maybe some of the reasons that these were, why our activity was higher with animal control, to include one particular case where they had 22 animals that they had to confiscate for cruelty. But I think it would probably be the best if you guys have questions about why the cost went up to address those to Red. He's going to have the first-hand experience. So, does the council want to hear from him?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that a yes?
Yeah, I think so.
How you doing? I'm Red X, Director of Davis County Animal Care and Control. So what questions do we have?
Why'd it go up so much?
Actually, it went up about 17%. To break it down into three functions, we break one down into an agreement that was based on calls. We break it down into a capital fund, which is based on percentage usage compared to the rest of the county cities. And then we have a $25 per, $25.75 per wildlife. Wildlife and the capital fund, I can't control. They have no effect. Budgeting has no effect on those because they're strictly, they're set up basically where the budget isn't coming from there. Those are going into two separate areas. The other fund is my budget increased for 2 staff members, and then we also increased, I believe we have 1 truck coming over this year. Is anybody familiar with how the formula works? So basically we average the last 2 years. So we're coming up on the very last year of where 2017 would have included 16. So we're coming up on the last year where the full cost will come in. We have had several city manager meetings and offered to all the elected officials in Davis County 3 times to come up to our shelter and as well as HSU. So we are trying to be transparent. We're working on changing our model overall as well on how we fund it. That first contract that occurred in 16 was pretty contentious. Davis County isn't super happy about paying 50% of the bill, and then cities weren't super happy about paying 20% more when they went from a third to a 50-50. So before we get to the end of the contract year in 2021, we're trying to come up with another model. And I believe you were at our meeting. Yeah, you were at our meeting. Their city manager was at our last meeting, so we're working towards a more equitable solution. The increase is basically funding positions. I'm understaffed. I run 4 kennel staff to take care of 300 animals in the summer. And I don't know if anybody's been in my building lately. It's a 1983 building that was essentially designed to hold animals till you kill them, which is no longer socially acceptable. So we are looking at funding a building possibly down the road. Again, it's one of the many things we're talking about. But essentially I'm looking at new staff members. We do have a capital improvement budget. We did put new kennels in finally. So that came out of the separate budget. That wouldn't be a part of this increase. That was a part of an increase of that capital budget that you saw that still you pay a percentage of. And then we're looking at a few new, actually no, I lost that in operating. We have 1 new truck coming this year to replace out of a fleet of 10.
Red,
So,
aren't you also planning on increasing service hours?
we did. Overall, so that actually didn't impact my budget. We actually increased service hours without impacting my bottom line budget. All the impacts are filling in areas where we were missing. Essentially, we have no outreach whatsoever. So if you think of a police department, they often operate a DARE program or some sort of program to talk to citizens. I do that solely with overtime on officer hours. So it gets really thin really quick. We actually turned down almost half of the offers we had to show up and do events just for animals, talk to schools, do things like that. We erred on the side of talking to schools rather, or doing kids educational things than doing larger events. We did extend our hours. We're now operating 7 days a week, Monday through Sunday. We extended our operating hours from 8 to 5 to 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, 8 to 6 on Saturday, and then I believe 8 to 6 on Sunday as well. So we extended our operating hours. Our shelter stays open later. We went from opening at 8 until 5. We now open 10 to 6. It actually is a reduction in actual open hours to the public. However, we get more people at 6 because nobody can really show up to see us at 8 o'clock where most people are at work. So staying open later gives us a chance to get animals out a little later, or get, you lose Rover, you can stop by and get him after work.
So, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Lisa.
I noticed that you go out on subtypes. It has barks,
Mhm.
and so are you required to respond to every nuisance call? Do we pass any of that along to the people? I noticed that quite a few calls would come from the same addresses.
Mm-hmm.
Does that? So I'm just wondering, do our citizens know that this is accruing tremendous cost? Is any of that passed along to us, to a citizen? Is it just taken care of without any mention of what it costs in order to come out Do we let them know on the phone if they do that? I'm just wondering what our
We
pass
don't,
along is.
so we don't pass along in terms of costs. We do, so when it comes to barks, we deal with a lot of neighbor issues. Matter of fact, that's why, I mean, no offense to the chief, that's why a lot of police departments don't want a lot to do with us, because animals are one way to get everybody mad almost instantly. Yeah, and a lot of what we do is you know, domestic dispute between two neighbors. What we will do is we will answer bark calls. What you will see usually is at least 2 or 3 sequences on those bark calls. The first sequence would be we will show up, we will talk to the people, we'll inform the person of the complainant that we require a bark log. We also require them to sign the citation, because without an affirmation, my officer can't say that the barking was occurred. So essentially you're saying, we're writing the citation on your behalf essentially at that point. And then we can put it before a judge. A lot of times we'll try to solve it by talking to the other neighbor as well and say, hey, listen, your dog is barking, just so you know they're going to be keeping track of that. The second sequence, so the second time we show up, would be to collect the bark log, see if everything's gone well one way or the other, and then sometimes there's a third depending on how it goes. You know, I lost my bark log, I didn't keep track of it, whatever we deal with. We will stop going out on calls. We don't do so without notifying the city manager and usually the mayor and the police chief if we can of what's becoming a nuisance. We do have situations that have gotten so bad that cities have mandated arbitrators between neighbors. I've got one of those right now. What we will do is we will run enough calls, enough extra patrols to ensure that there's no situation that we see. So if you tell me your neighbor's dog is barking, I show up and you just hate your neighbor because, I don't know, your kid's got in a fight, I will show up enough to have a solid case before even a judge or a court to say we have shown up enough. There is no barking in our opinion on the hours that they say they are. We're done. We will show up and drive by, and then we're done.
Okay, so on these, are we paying as a city under the current contract per incident or per visit or per case?
It's an average of the last 2 years calls. So it's an activity.
So each time, every activity is a case.
It's a proportionate
so
share of
when
the
you go out a
county.
third time because somebody wasn't responsible, we pay another. I mean, it just adds
well,
to our cost.
it does add to the cost, but it's not a direct addition. So if you take the entire piece of the pie for all of the calls we run for the entire year, right? Every call we run, you're paying a percentage of those calls. So if I run more calls in your jurisdiction, it's going to go up. If I run less calls, it may stay even, or if the budget increases, it'll go up less. So you're not paying for each call directly. So we average 2,000. This is my formula, by the way. They averaged the last 2 years, 17 and 18 together. That is used as an average number of calls. That average number of calls is taken from the average number of calls over those 2 years for the entire county. And then that percentage is what you pay of the 50% of the budget sans the revenue that the shelter makes.
So you're paying the ratio of your city's cost.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's a ratio of your cost.
Yeah.
So it'll go up, but it
goes
won't
up,
go up directly.
It goes up.
More
Yeah.
calls
So
increases
more
your
calls.
percentage.
Yeah, exactly. Wildlife is a direct ratio, though. Wildlife is 25-75 a call. So if you get more wildlife calls,
And we
you'll see
have
the
a situation there where we're on the edge of the cities. It's not like we border. So if we get animals that cross over from Antelope Island, which we have.
I'm chasing a horse right now that's probably right off of your city.
Yeah.
One of your residents lost a horse. So if you get a call about a horse in the lake, we
And
know he's there.
I
Council,
already had
I'm gonna
lunch.
recognize Corinne. She's been trying to get in here for a minute. Corinne?
Don't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to ask, considering the fact that you had some significant increases in your budget this last year with hiring 2 additional personnel and so forth, do you anticipate big budget items next year as well? I'm just concerned about this being an ever-increasing percentage and just wanted to plan ahead for the future. What do you see for next year?
There's a possibility of one. So right now I only run 4 kennel staff members to take care of 300 animals. The increases were we moved, without a budget increase, we moved a vet out of contract into labor as a part of our pool. That was a zero sum. You wouldn't have seen that increase. What we did get is somebody to manage volunteers in order to hopefully take advantage of free labor to some point. The person managing volunteers at this point is a kennel staff member who cleans kennels and then does that for an hour. And then we're looking for somebody to help. What was essentially in the former position as director, which wasn't filled, it was left open. So we're basically refilling a position that was open as an assistant director, but it's not really a director's position, it's more of a development position as we move forward. So somebody that's looking to help find a revenue stream, basically. So next year we'll be looking at possibly kennel staff. And I would invite everybody, I mean, if you're interested in where we're going, we're being super transparent. We've held several meetings. Come talk to us. You know, we just got done with a work session today discussing animal control and potential for districts and that sort of thing.
That's exactly where I'd like to go with this.
Just another question to follow along with that. Could we possibly get an email about those meetings, because we don't have a representative from every city that goes to those? So just an update, for instance.
I could try to get an email to city managers, or at least one point of contact in each city, yeah, without question.
So that's where I was going with this. This has grown quite a bit since I joined the council in just a couple of years, and it seems like there's a lot to discuss with little representation. I'm wondering if this isn't to the point where we ought to be talking with the county commissioners about a special service district, because where every city has a representative,
Yeah,
and where we could learn from others and, you know, benefits to keep costs down. I would advocate that the mayor go to COG and try to advocate for a special service district being formed for animal control. It seems to fit the criteria that we use for those kind of things, and we really want representation.
Council, we're looking for a direction tonight. We've allotted our time. What direction would you like to go?
Direction on this specifically, if we want to, we can't
I
not
don't think we
approve
have
it.
any
What-
choice,
what's
so
our-
what's the...
But we still want animal control, and this is,
Yeah.
it's not like we can go out for bid, so I
There's
think it
no
is what it
opt-out.
is.
Yeah, but I do think in the future, I'd like to find out if there's a way to communicate to the citizens. Every time you make a call, it ups our ratio of what we're spending, and $20,000
That ought to be an article
is
that is
quite a bit
written
of
in
money
the-
per
in the
year to
magazine
increase.
explaining that.
Well, I want people to be able to call animal control if there's a problem. But the one incident that he sent us a letter about with the 7 horses, 1 donkey, and 14 goats, I think that one specifically, we need to make sure that someone that has an incident like that
is paying.
That is paying for that type of service, because that is ridiculous, especially where it's an animal cruelty. I think that's one where we need to go in and say, look, this, I don't know. It just seems like this is one we need to get some.
If there was a
recompense
special
back.
service district, we could start the discussion about certain types of calls that are maybe repetitive or abusive have to bear some of the burden of the cost.
Agreed.
And that's something that probably ought to be brought up in that setting.
Yeah.
Council, would you feel comfortable with moving this on for a business action with the understanding that we're going to take this as a work session item, and I'm happy to approach COG with anything that you'd like to do.
Okay.
I really, I'd like you
I
to
agree
approach
with that.
COG with that, yeah.
I think we need to
Yes.
approve it.
Yes.
But
Brody has a
Yeah,
comment.
approve it.
So one of the discussions you'll hear about too, and we wanted to get through this contract first, but at the county level with the commissioners already, they're exploring actually taking the whole service back. So it's strictly a county service as one option. Obviously there's tax millage associated with that as part of the discussion, but instead of having the cities participate financially, it's a county service, so everyone in the county pays for it.
at the same time, I do feel like we should look into some way that anyone that is abusing it or using way more than their fair share of resources should have some cost to bear on that.
Yeah, when there's a criminal case like the cruelty, they'll go through the court system, and depends on the judge, but you may get fines out of them.
Well, I do understand that, but the burden that the city pays, let's say that by the time it gets to a court case, there's been 20 visits, there's been repeated offenses, there's been, at that point, they're putting their legal problem on the burden of all of the citizens, and that's not fair.
And from a county standpoint on that bus alone generated about $12,000 in care that never passed on to you, that actually stayed in Davis County. That's vet care, husbandry care, feed. We can't return them back to cruelty cases like that. We can't return up to the auction because the gentleman was literally waiting to go to the auction. He was there every day waiting to get his animals back to essentially circumvent the court. So it gets interesting, and believe me, I feel for you when you have to show up to them. We don't want to show up regularly either. We do cease contact, And we do a patrol rather than a contact, where we'll drive by in order to just say, hey, the cruelty is not there, look at the animal, stop doing contact with the person. But it still counts as us having to drive by to ensure certain calls we will always go to. Wellness cruelty or welfare cruelty, we won't ignore. The one time we ignore that, we'll have a dead animal.
You shouldn't, and so that.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't change the fact that the citizens of the county are paying a lot of money because I just feel like they should have to cover that cost.
And to your point about COG, September 18th, the COG meeting's in the shelter. So.
Okay, great.
And council, I'm willing to take anything as an agenda item from you to COG. I'll be glad to do that.
And we will have another city manager meeting coming, just so you know, as a heads up. We had a meeting today concerning districts and direction of animal control with the commissioners and the auditor. So we'll be talking, or Brandon or Scott will be reaching out to you.
Okay, thank you. Council,
Thank you.
I'm going to move this on. I'm going to make one adjustment to the agenda here and then another one later on. I would like to move item D down to just before item I for purposes of discussion on PRD. So if you would draw an arrow there, we'll move it down to before I. Let's go to item E, discuss proposal to amend policy relating to financial hardship waivers. Is that you, Aaron?
Yep. Okay. In 2014, there was a resolution adopted for financial hardship, and that was attached, put in the packet. One of the things that it addressed was a bottom, or basically a basement to that, a minimum of $100. One thing that it failed to address that was discovered was that there was really no max to it. And in the packet, I put some examples in. We get between 5 and 10 requests a year on average. And the end of last year, we had somebody that come in at a little over 300% of the federal poverty guideline, which was a single person, and it still had quite a big reduction in their ambulance bill. That after talking with Brody on, we kind of felt like there was really not a ceiling on that. I put down here somebody that's making $100,000 a year, based upon the households, they still receive quite a bit of a deduction in their ambulance bill. I even threw in even a real high case scenario of somebody making $250,000 a year asking for a financial hardship on their ambulance bill would still receive about $250 off of that ambulance bill. So one of the things that I'm bringing for consideration is adding one line into that and having the financial hardship request calculated at 300% of the federal poverty guideline or greater will not be eligible for a fee reduction.
Well, I can appreciate that, but if you've done research that said that at 250% there's still a sizable reduction, I'm wondering if that's low enough.
Right. And
because at the point that you're way above, I mean, the point you're considered affluent, why are we calling you hardshiped?
Right. Right. The process, just so you understand the process, when a person calls into our billing agency, the company that handles our ambulance billing, they ask for the financial hardship. They're given an application, and part of that application requires them to submit a cover letter explaining their hardship. They have to supply their last tax return, signed tax return, and 3 months of paycheck stubs. And then that information is verified before it's placed into the calculator on the financial hardship calculator to find out where the reduction is. And that's where this is for the council to consider. I mean, 250, that would be the decision for you guys on what you want. This is just something we felt on the federal poverty guideline level. When you go to the website, it caps it there at 400%. And so we had just come to you with the 300%. This is something that's definitely up for discussion. So
I'm okay either way.
I'm okay that we do it.
Yeah, I think 300 or 250. I don't really have a strong preference. I'm assuming you came up with 300.
300 was
research.
Yeah, 300 was through the research, and it was based upon the last case we had. Most of the hardships that I've had have been at the 100 to 200% of the poverty level. They've submitted the proper documentation. There have been some that haven't submitted the documentation that's automatically declined. But so this was one case out of maybe 8 we've had over the last year and a half that was over the 300% of this poverty level, and it kind of put a red flag up. So I put the numbers in, and I even put somebody making $500,000 a year, and they would still receive a deduction on their ambulance
See,
bill.
that's
And
not
I thought
working out.
that was
Because
probably
the
something.
burden then is borne by everybody else who, and that's not right.
Right.
Corinne, do you have a comment? You good? Okay.
No, I'm just listening. I'm agreeing with the other two as well.
Okay.
The comments that have been made with the 300 capping it as what's been recommended, I think that's just fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It sounds like this is kind of a one-off case, so if I'm good with 300. If you want to go 250, I mean, I could support that.
You've just given me a good argument for 250. I don't want to be giving, what I don't want to do is pass that on to the other 30,000 people in the city because one guy found a loophole in the formula. So that's
Right.
what I'm concerned about. It's not fair to those people that somebody's utilizing the system unfairly.
Right. And our ambulance billing company does work with individuals with payments and the whole bit. So it's not that they have to pay the entire bill at one point. And they're worked with. So whatever council recommends, we'll submit that change in the resolution.
I'm fine with
Suggestions?
300,000.
I would do 250.
I don't, yeah, I don't know that it makes a big difference, but when I just look at the numbers you've provided and compare it to my household and my budget, I think 250 makes sense.
Okay. Good. I'll go 250 then.
I'll go 250.
Corinne, are you good with that?
Yes, that sounds fine.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I'll make that change.
Great.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Can we place that on a consent agenda?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Robert. Is this Robert Stormgrain? Yep.
And he may need to plug in. Maybe not.
There's just a memo
Okay.
that I brought you. So, last council meeting, I brought the stormwater impact fee, facility plan, and impact fee analysis to you. Council had a really great question regarding why storm impact fees are not being assessed differently based on zone. Why they currently are now, I don't have an explanation for that, but why they should be treated the same is related to storm detention. So every property by ordinance is required to detain at a constant, at that same outfall discharge flow rate, which is 0.2 CFS per acre. So regardless of how much stormwater one site generates over another, they all have to discharge at the same flow rate. So it doesn't create a bigger capacity problem on our system. So we don't have to necessarily build bigger pipes for commercial areas because they hold on to that water, and it just takes a little bit longer to drain off. So there's no additional capacity requirements on the city's system to do it. The commercial and industrial that have those bigger detention volumes, those bigger storm volumes to handle, they have to spend the dollars to on their own property. So
To store and then let it gradually cycle the system.
so for us to have them bear a bigger cost on the impact fee is not fair.
And I agree with all of that. And I actually thanks for going and looking at this because I learned a lot over all of this. One thing we're still not addressing, this is one thing we talked about, is the agricultural aspect of the city.
Right.
And so if someone did want to come in and create a new farm, this would be a big expense for them. And so I'm kind of one that thinks, this should be okay in all zones except for agricultural. And for agriculture, I think they should have a substantial smaller rate just because I want to encourage farming in Syracuse as long as possible.
And you as a council, you have that ability to make that decision. What was prepared was, here's the maximum amount, just nothing greater than that amount. And we have not had any new farms or new developments that were just farm or agriculture. So changing that rate or reducing it probably won't really make a big impact
Agree.
to the city. So So, yeah, you certainly can decide on that.
The other thing that I was a little uncomfortable with, and I need to go through and finish all the Zions Bank research. I'm uncomfortable with the fact that this would put us second only to Orem, I believe, and as far as cost goes. Especially we had a resident today, you know, talking about, you know, we need to make sure that we're being conscientious to make sure that we can provide for new growth here in the city. So I guess I want to try and make sure that the fee is covering the costs, but at the same time we are making sure that we're encouraging growth, growth in the right places.
Right.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I have one response. I don't know.
Go for it.
I can explain why some of those costs are bigger. A lot of our development on east of Bluff is mostly developed out.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the stormwaters were conveyed into ditches that go out to the lake. Now most of our development's on our fringes. You know, a lot of it's west of Bluff, and those ditches now need to be piped with the developments, and so these ditches are conveying large volumes of stormwater. So those pipe sizes are larger,
Yeah.
and they go out to the lake or wherever they are required to through the development, right? So that's an explanation from what I can see from the current plan that we have now to what this proposed plan is. A lot of those are piping ditches. That were out
So it's
west.
just we have to put in a lot of infrastructure for it.
Yeah.
I just don't like being high near the top of the list.
I guess
However,
just look at
it
the
is
difference.
something that is not placed on those who are here now.
It's true. It should
that
cover the
part of
cost.
it, that part of it, I'm actually more comfortable that the cost is higher, because alternatively, usually impact fees do not keep up with the impact that new growth has. And so, regardless of what it is, I'd like it to be covered by those who join the community, and especially where we have a community that we're really spending time trying to educate that you know, you can't just close the door when you got here and say no more. So we already trying to deal with that attitude. We might as well be fair and say the burden of new development is not on the existing as much as we're using the impact fees correctly.
Yeah.
The heartburn of those high fees is when people say, whether it's right or wrong, well, Syracuse has higher fees than everybody else. And in this case, they're going to be right in the stormwater area.
But on an impact fee,
but
not on
an impact
not
fee,
on a
yeah.
resident fee.
Right. So, but I'm with what you guys, I think you're all saying, is that it needs to pay. New
Yeah.
impact new growth needs to pay for the impact. And in a growing community that used to be a farm community, that means ditching or piping all these ditches.
Yeah.
Well, and along those lines, we do have to be really cognizant of what our community is made up of, and it's farmers and families. And so, you're right. We're different than Clearfield. They have a very different everything, and the same with all the surrounding communities, Layton as well. And so, I just believe there are some things that just are what they are, and it's not that we're making money on this. We're just paying.
We're just paying
for the
it.
infrastructure.
Corinne, do you have comment?
I would agree with that last statement that we just need to explain to residents that we're not making money off of this, but it is going to cover the cost, and that's fair for any new development. Thank you. I mean, you guys are doing great. I like it.
Okay, so I just motion to put this on common consent, move forward.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
I second.
Well, do we want to do anything with the agricultural aspect of it? Do we think it's not impactful
I don't
enough?
think that's going to impact, because it'd be pretty tough. So my belief is that anything that's agriculture related is already established as agriculture.
But if we were selling a farm to somebody else, wouldn't those fees then go to that new
Yes.
person? Yes or no, Robert?
Yes,
So
So in
basically,
that
this
case-
this could end the farm, and
it
I
could
would-
end the
They're
farm, but it
developing
wouldn't
the-
start a new farm.
Even a 5 acre could be a burden, so I would
It's
agree
gonna
with
be from someone else
reducing
buys it,
the
they don't pay.
It's only if they
agricultural
develop a
If it's
farm.
only if they
But
develop.
it's only if they develop a new
So it's
farm.
not, so if
So
somebody
they
builds a
bring
new
it
It has
barn
nothing to do with
and
Current
needs
existing
to get a
farms.
building
Okay.
permit
Which I don't see.
on their
happening.
existing
Yeah,
property,
I can't
that's
imagine
A1.
anything at this
then
point
what?
that's farmable
For a
isn't
barn?
already being.
New structure. on
Well, there's a lot of property we haven't
That's-
annexed yet.
Yeah, but there's a reason it's not being farmed
Huh?
too.
Well, in
Fair.
the case where it possibly could, where it's not gonna create a burden, I still think it would be fair to reduce that for agricultural. Since it's not a big thing, it's not going to happen very often, we put a barn
I
on
don't
it,
think ever.
great.
And if it never gets used,
Then
But-
that's
That's right.
okay.
in the event that someone does want to, I want to make sure it's an option.
And I think from a financial perspective, yeah, if you have a lower fee for agricultural, the 2 or 3 times maybe that this would ever happen, the financial impact is not that great.
Okay.
No.
Council, I'll remind you that this requires public hearing, and we will need to continue that public hearing, so
Oh.
we cannot put it onto a consent
Okay,
agenda.
that's fine.
Okay.
So move to go to public hearing.
Well, we won't
Well-
do that today. That'll have to be announced, so
Yep.
that'll be in a business meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
That's what I mean.
Noah, we're at G, discussion on branding. Is
Hey,
that-
can I ask that we move G to after H, switch those two so that we can get to these people who are here for H?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
Let's move G before I. So you're in
We're
the
creating a
hot
whole new
seat for
alphabet
final
today.
plat on Criddle Farms.
Doing Criddle Farms right now?
Criddle Farms,
Yep.
Okay. Criddle Farms, located approximately 900 south, 4,000 west. It's zoned R3, about 9.5 acres, 29 lots. Has gone through Planning Commission. They recommend approval. There are some outstanding comments with West Point because they have a utility easement going through West Point. Spoken with their city engineer, and he says he's fine with a conditional approval as long as his comments are taken care of before construction begins.
Then let's go forward, because
Yep.
we've known this is coming, so
Yep. Okay,
done.
Any other discussion? Yes.
I have a question. I showed this to Noah the other day. I received a flyer from them, and the reason why I bring it up is because it is shown in the maps in here about their clubhouse / swimming pool. Have we made any progress on what's going to happen there between the negotiations?
Yeah, I don't think we ever resolved that.
I don't think so either.
But that is part of this plat approval.
But that isn't, it is?
Well, I mean, it's listed as part of the plat, isn't it?
So
Yeah, it's part of the plat.
that would be a separate item where we'd have to amend the development agreement. It's part of Criddle South Phase 1. This has a small portion of that you can see here. Oh, actually, you can't see it because I'm not plugged in.
For anyone?
You're fine.
Yeah, if you want, I could plug in here.
I think we get it.
You
The
get it?
bottom line is if it's not part of this, then let's just take it when it is part of the question.
It will be a future agenda item
Yeah.
that
Okay.
we need to amend the plat, and
So
we're
let's-
working on that. That'll probably be in the next month.
So let's take care of this as is, because I don't think there's a controversy there.
Council,
Yeah.
can we place this on a consent
Yes.
agenda? All right,
So long as it's clear that
Yes.
there's more to do on that part.
okay.
Yes.
Can we go to item 2?
Thank you, Noah.
You're welcome.
No, item 2, I'm gonna move that one too, so I'd like to get to these PRD discussions earlier.
Okay.
So I wanna move 2 down to after 4 and before 5.
Okay.
Okay, so what is
It's
the
hard to
next
follow
item?
this
The next
packet.
item is 3.
So that means we're at 3?
We're at 3.
General
Three.
map, residential R1,
2
PRD.
planned residential.
2921 Southwell.
I wanna take care of these PRD.
A1, R1,
Yes.
PRD. Oh.
Okay. You can see on the map, this is the context. The
Can I just make a comment to Corinne? Corinne, we plugged in Noah, so we can't see you, so you'll have to speak up.
We're on 3.
Did we lose her altogether?
No, I'm
Okay.
here.
So,
Just really quick, what item are you on? I'm a
We're-
little lost.
H3.
Got it.
I can't imagine why you're lost.
You're in Orlando.
We can't see you now, and I can't see your hand. So if you'll just meld yourself with me vocally.
You bet. Thank you.
So this is, I mean, we've discussed PRD in this neighborhood recently, and has recently changed the general plan and zoning to PRD in the 3 parcels to the west. As an update, the Planning Commission reviewed this application on the 19th, and about 40 people came and were pretty vocal and had some concerns, mainly relating to traffic coming through their subdivision. Some of them were, you know, some good recommendations and good things that could be incorporated into a site plan should this actually go through. But eventually the Planning Commission said that they don't recommend this change.
And that was unanimous, correct?
Unanimous, yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with them. I'm still a no for PRD in this area of the city. I don't feel like it's the right zone for this. So I'm a no.
I think I'm a no as well. Just based on the resident, I mean, 40 people out to a planning meeting?
Yeah, to a
First of all, wow. Thank you for coming out and talking to us. And at the same time, it's if the neighbors are against it, the Planning Commission is against it, I don't know why I would reverse all of that.
Well, and I've driven through there, and and we don't take this lightly that we just shut down developers. It's enough of us have been involved in small businesses and development and trying to get plats approved and zones changed in order for our own, well, just to provide a living. So this isn't just a knee-jerk reaction. This is having gone down there, and I just don't feel like it's a good fit for this community. It's a peaceful area. It's trailside. And even, I also look at PRD, and it's just not, my feeling is this is not a good fit.
Well, my feeling is it has to be, because we already did it on the other side. And
Well, I voted against it. Then
I know,
too.
I know it wasn't. I know it wasn't unanimous, but it's there now. And even Trailside is, to me, essentially a PRD. It's essentially the whole section there between the roundabout and almost to the park needs to look pretty similar. We're creating an island there in the middle of that then what?
Well, I don't think I have a problem changing the zone to something that's not R1. Isn't that what it is right now?
Yeah, it's R1.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem changing that, but I think when we talk about PRD being changed and adding a higher density to that, then I think we just put 2 different communities together.
Yeah, I mean, we've got
Yes,
R1 on one side, our R1 cluster, and then on the other side we have a senior community.
Yeah.
And we have no idea what's going to go in here other than possibly townhouses.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem like it fits in there.
The density of that makes a difference to me.
Corinne?
Whatever we need to put in there, I think it is fair to have it match to both sides. Because if it's adjacent to what is existing right there, I don't know that a lot of people are going to be happy with an R2 right next to an R1 cluster, for instance. So as long as we can figure out some sort of zoning that will match what's already there, they're going to be adjacent to the West Davis corridor. And then we also need to take a look at the traffic, the roads around there. That was the #1 concern of the Planning Commission meeting, was are the roads adequate? And so obviously that's going to be part of this consideration. And so if we can address that, it should match the area which is adjacent to an R1 cluster, and those are pretty tight.
And you
we
guys,
can also require some open space along with that, just like the R1 cluster did, with getting the trails in their cities being city ownership where they're not right now, requiring some of the open space. Those things need to be cleaned up, and it needs to match.
So I don't buy the argument that because one zone next to it is one thing, we have to now make it all the same. I understand the continuity of development, but there is no by granting one person's property one zone doesn't automatically say that forever on we're just going to continue. Otherwise, the domino is everything can be whatever it is, and that's not right. So,
No, Corinne said it.
Any sort of way, because it is within an island and it's adjacent to West Davis corridor. It's the appropriate kind of area to have it contained and matching a certain area. It's not going. This is a very contained island.
so I guess the point that I would get to is to arrive at a decision. You have 3 no's, so I think this one fails.
I am curious to see what Vision 2050, the working group, wants to do in this area, and I think that's one that we can kind of get their input on.
Because it is changing it's changing the dynamics of Syracuse. Having
It
West
is.
Davis corridor come in, it will either take away from our town square and move it west, or we'll have to be really specific in how we structure this connection to the West Davis, and we'd hate to have it pull all the businesses out of the center. But also, I once again I bring up that I wouldn't approve this to be changed to high density, but I wouldn't want to change what a PRD is specifically called for now, how many units per acre. But I do think that this is ready for a zone change from R1 into something that blends better. So I agree, Corinne.
Council?
And that's the
your
piece that's
thoughts.
important to me, is that it blends, and so
Yeah.
you know, so it's more important to me what the developer is going to put in there, because it's an island if it's just left empty. It's an island also if it's 16 units per acre.
It
Council?
can't remain R1.
Council, would you like to hear from the applicant?
Yeah.
Wow, what's going on?
Mike?
Yeah.
Come to
Yes.
the.
Thanks for letting me talk.
And I'll remind you that we can't act on this
Sure.
tonight. This is a
No,
work
right.
session.
So we're just looking for direction, because we agree we do need to, we're just trying to plan. We don't have anything brought before you. We pitched down some different ideas, but we need a direction on how to plan, and we feel like with what we have to the side of us with the PRD and Trailside, the R1's gone through a lot of clusters, gone through a lot of different changes over the years. If you look at their actual density, they are pretty similar to a PRD. So the hard part is we'd be willing to say, yeah, we'll do this or we'll do that, but we need a general plan change first in order to do that. And if I remember right, and I've read your recommendation on how to do the PRD, you still have the option. It's not an automatic, well, you get 10 units because you go PRD. You still have the option or the guidelines to say, you might be PRD, but it makes sense to keep you at 6 units because this side of you's this side of you's this, so we're going to leave you at a PRD with this kind of a zoning. And so, but we're just looking for a zone to go in that direction because we would be an island right in the middle of it. And that's what's hard is it's like I can make these promises, but if I don't get a zone, then I can't do anything. So
Noah?
If you guys would like to see, a concept plan, the current the amendment to the PRD as we're writing it, soon you will have the ability to look at the concept plan before you change the general plan. So that is an option if you did want to wait to see what kind of plan he would come up with before you could table that, or or whatever you guys, if you guys wanted to move it
I
into
mean,
the next
before
meeting.
we have that option now.
You know what, I don't like kicking things down the road because that places a burden on Mike to have to come up with a development
Yeah.
and write everything up. And then if we say no, that's
It's
a
up to
waste
you.
of his money and his resources, and I hate to do that to you. So I would rather have us give a very specific zone to this that he knows that when he comes up with an idea, it's not going to be shot down unless
Okay.
it doesn't go with what we've already approved.
But the application is that we get to approve, table, or deny a PRD. And a PRD doesn't fit. So on that alone,
I
I
see.
think the action goes forward. I hear what you're saying. It would be nice to give him some more specific direction. We can't do that on this application. We have to do that outside of the meeting and say, propose this, maybe it's got some favorable sense or something else. But we don't get to negotiate on that.
So what does PRD stand now? How
Planned
many?
residential
No, but
development.
I mean
6 units to the
6,
acre is what it
okay.
allows for right now. And
But-
trail sites 5 to 6 on their units per acre.
So how come we keep talking about bringing that up to a higher density than 6?
That would be for item number 5.
But still a PRD
You're right.
though, right? We're
That's
changing
right.
the zone. So if the zone stands at PRD right now, why are we talking about switching out
See, if we gave this PRD and then we changed the PRD, this could end up being 14, 15
which
units.
hardly seems fair to the developers who come in here with an idea as to what
Right.
they're allowed to do, and then
As
we
far
keep
as-
changing it.
Corinne?
Sorry, Corinne.
It's okay, it's okay. As far as I understand, under whatever PRD the situation it is, when you accept it, that's the one that they have to go with.
Mm-mm.
Is that true?
Is that correct,
No,
Noah?
if we change PRD,
What
we
is the
can
question?
go to the new PRD.
Whatever the verbiage is for the PRD currently, and if it was accepted now, that it wouldn't change according to what the change is later, but I don't
That's not
think that
correct,
doesn't
because
seem right.
if somebody has a PRD now, and
Yeah,
they sit on
that's-
it for 2 years, they could now have the new PRD.
Yeah,
That's
when you
correct.
change the ordinance, that when he applies for concept plan, that is what he has to follow. So if you do
Right.
change it, then he would be
See, and
able
that's-
to apply with that.
So I guess what I'm asking for, as a developer, I've worked a lot in this city. Like I've done the Bluff, Wilcox, Country Fields. I've done a lot of really great communities in the community. So I guess I would ask, just like everybody's taken my neighbor's word, who hasn't ever done a development one in Syracuse, and given him a PRD zone, that my word would be, it'll match what's around me. I won't come in and try and change it. And I would just hope that I've got the rapport with everybody, because I've worked with a lot of people in here through different developments, that I would bring that before you guys.
I'm sorry, Mike, we can't do that, because if we said, yeah, Mike, we're gonna go with you on your word.
I know.
And the next guy comes and says, take me at my word, you don't have any reason not to.
Right.
And then we get totally shammed, that's just, we can't do that.
So that's what's frustrating, is because I've heard it said, there's retirement coming in next to me. That's all he gave was his word, and now everybody thinks it's gonna be a requirement
I
community.
voted for that no as well.
Well, I'm just saying, I've done a lot of good work in the city, and so I don't have any other zone to pick. R3, you can do 3 units per the acre. That doesn't fit the community, the area, because I've got 6 and 5 on the sides of me. There's no other zone that really works to go on this property than what I'm asking for right now. It really makes sense to go there with the West Davis corridor coming on the side of me and the zones that are around me.
Doesn't PRD still require, or at least allow, a development agreement?
Yep, the
Yeah.
current language requires a development agreement at preliminary plat.
I mean, for me, based on all the stuff that I've gotten, both online and just phone calls, and I would say that the community is against this. At least all the ones
Now,
I've
by
talked
community,
with.
the neighbor to the side of me.
No, I've talked to hundreds of people on
Right,
this.
and now words around that we're trying to do something higher, you know what I mean? But if I bring in patio homes, but it's like the chicken and the egg, which comes first, you know? Even if I bring in a development agreement, I'll still get the same, or a concept plan, I'll still get the same argument that, well, you say you're gonna do that, but how do I know that? You know, so how do I plan for what I'm gonna do on this property? I'm trying to plan for utilities coming from my neighbor's property through the West Davis corridor. We're trying to put these plans in place, and how do we do that?
But see, what I was going to say is let me finish.
Yeah.
Is right now we have a committee of citizens and developers and stakeholders that are all right now trying to figure out what the correct land use around the West Davis corridor is going to be. And I'm going to rely heavily upon the recommendation of that committee to figure out what is supposed to go where, because ultimately it's them that's creating this vision. So if they come to me and say, you know what, PRD fits, I will support it at that time. But as of right now, the people I've talked to have said no.
And from the beginning, several of us have said, we think that opinion needs to come out before we take all these actions step by step, but they keep coming before us, I think trying to circumvent that committee, afraid of what that committee might say. So let's let that visioning committee finish
give us a timeline. When is that looking to
That's
be
supposed
done?
to be
A month.
April, right?
In a
In
month.
April.
It'll be
I
through.
have one thought with all of that committee things. I do know that in the past, what the definition of PRD was compared to this units that it is now was considered really poorly, and that's why it was changed. So I don't know if the members of the committee, they need to be informed of what the current PRD is now, and also what it could also be, so that it is not considered what it was in the past. So I'm just wanting to clarify, because a lot of people consider PRD, they hear that and they think, oh my word, it's a dirty word, when actually if we're developing something similar to what's there, and people go, oh, well that makes sense, and it's not necessarily just associated with the word PRD.
Right. They need to be educated. I
Yeah.
think they're getting a lot of that. I think that the team is doing a great job working with them to make sure they know what it is they're doing.
But the people you're saying you heard from, I think are scared of the high density discussion, not the words the acronym PRD.
Yeah.
And so that's not what we're talking about here. I don't think. I think we're talking about, and he really wants to put something that blends in with there, and I think that we have tools to hold him to that.
Oh, is
I'm
there a
speaking
tool?
for myself because I realized that the vote for the other one was not unanimous. But I feel like I would be hypocritical to have voted for that one and not for this one.
That's fine. But I have a concern, and that is, we're over time. We had direction given by majority of the council, and yet we beat these points to death. And I'm really kind of frustrated that it feels like if you don't get the answer you want, we're going to put it on agenda after agenda after agenda and try to re-argue the same thing.
This is on the agenda because he applied for it.
Okay,
And he
but
paid a fee.
it's been defeated. I mean, you've had the nod before, but it keeps coming back.
When? When have we
We've
had
never,
it on?
we
on
haven't
this one?
realized, we haven't acted on this before.
Well, 20 minutes ago, we all gave the votes necessary to move forward.
We can't vote here.
But we had the head nod that we could move on to another item.
Noah, is there a tool in here that they can hold me to 6 units no matter what the new PRD zone change is? I can be held to 6 units to the acre.
Yep.
That because it fits the area, whatever their reasoning is, there's a tool in here that says, Mike, the most you're gonna get is this, no matter what you come in with, whatever, here's what we're giving you.
Well, that'd be part of the developer agreement, right?
There's a development agreement, so there's current PRD development agreement at preliminary plat, future PRD, if maybe
If
future
it even
PRD
passes, yeah.
is right up front concept plan development.
I guess my question: Are you? For now, I think this is it's been defeated. But like I said, I'm willing to reconsider based on what happens in a month. Do
First division.
with the end of this, based on what that committee comes out with, I would be willing to change if that is what they recommend.
And it's up to what you guys want to do. I know you guys have a difficult job in envisioning what this area of the neighborhood is. I just want to make you aware, if you do put this on the agenda to vote no, which is obviously your choice, that he can't reapply for the rezone for 6 months. So after a failed application, so that's up to you. But there's some limits after. If you do say no, I just want to make you aware of that.
And he'd have to just sit for 6 months with no ability to move forward.
No, he can apply for something different.
He
He
could-
could, okay,
What would
so
that
he
be,
could
though,
apply
Dave?
for a different zone if we
What
were to
zone
create a different
exists, though?
zone?
Yeah, he could apply for anything else except for PRD.
And our 4, which will get shot down, the only thing that makes sense is the PRD because it matches the density on all sides of it. That's what makes sense.
So if the committee comes in April and says, this looks like a merge in between Trailside and this area, and we're fine with 5 to 6 units per acre, then we can't do anything for 6 months. He has to just sit on that.
Or he could withdraw his application and resubmit in a month.
Council, I'm going to call the discussion on this. We can't act on it at all tonight.
Is that correct?
Alright.
He could withdraw his
You
application.
can table.
We can table.
Yeah, you'd wanna ask him.
Like I was saying, if you tabled it and then we amend the ordinance, he could come back with a concept plan and it sounds like he's willing to work with you and provide
Yeah.
something that you guys want to see. It's up to you.
Like I said, I just want to get the outputs of that group before I start rezoning this whole corridor.
So it sounds like a table.
Well, we're not doing anything. I mean, we
Yeah.
keep repeating that.
So if we
We
bring
don't
it
do
up,
anything in this meeting.
so it'll be on the next agenda, at
Yeah.
which point we can either decline or table.
That's right.
Okay,
Let's
thank
move
you.
on. Okay. Are we at 4?
Yes. Request for general plan map amendment from general commercial to PRD. The applicant called me before the meeting and apologized that he wasn't able to make it. His son received a mission call or something like that. So here you have another request for PRD, and the reason why, if I can explain, the reason why these applications came in the time they did is because we have an open amendment period for our general plan map. It's closed, and so outside of the open amendment period, we can still receive applications, but it has to come before City Council and receive the quote nod to open the general plan.
Okay.
So they both applied during that open amendment period, so they could go straight to Planning Commission. So this right here is the area on Banbury and Antelope. You can see this is the current zoning. There's already PRD zoning there for the majority of the parcel, except for west of Banbury and along Antelope.
Between two businesses.
Between two businesses. And the reason why it wasn't zoned in the previous application was to reserve some area for commercial development. So this is the current general plan map. You can see the commercial along Antelope and on the west side of Banbury. This is the proposed general plan, which if depending on what happens, he would also apply for zoning after that. So you can see that he's proposing to add to his existing PRD. He said that he would like to do a townhome project.
So I do want to ask about what's actually been brought up. How likely are we to be able to get a curb cut on Antelope to get because this is a really deep development.
We've talked many times that there has to be a secondary access.
I've seen some
doesn't
conceptual
seem like
plans, and he has a curb cut on just west of the existing Pearson's Auto, and then you'd have I think 2 entrances off of Banbury. But those are things, obviously you want to make sure it's feasible to even have it there, but the actual details would be.
I just don't want to rezone this to something and then have it be something I'm unwilling to approve because it's not safe.
Sure.
Okay, but keep in mind, look, we're looking at those 2 options. What he's got as PRD now is already, so all we're talking about is the PRD sections that
next to the school,
right, and between the 2 businesses,
and next to the park,
which I think are correctly zoned general commercial. I just don't want to. I don't want to give those up. That's right there on that corner where our park and all kinds of activity take place, and there's businesses on all sides. I can't imagine giving up that corner to especially now, when we've got the West Davis corridor coming in, and we don't know how it's gonna change our city center. That could be more or less appealing, but we won't know that tonight.
Sure. And then I think I should report February 5th, Planning Commission held a public hearing. We did have quite a few neighbors come out. I've noticed a few of them here in the audience. They've expressed some concern about the traffic on Banbury and buffering on the north edge of the property. Planning Commission did actually unanimously recommend approval for this application. And we take that into consideration.
Okay.
We already gave him PRD in where it shows right there, so I think we gave it appropriately.
Now here's my question, we go back to PRD, what is it again? And right now we've got it sitting at 6 units per acre. I believe he's expecting
He's
expecting higher than that. So why do we keep trying to fit several zones in one zone? I mean, we keep kind of messing with that, and I think that either it needs to have its own specific zone that is a higher density, and we are very careful about where we approve that. But when we go so vague in general that we say PRD, 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 one of them is twice as big or bigger for impact, for people, for cars, for traffic.
Yeah,
right now, that concerns me.
Yeah, we essentially have kind of those 3 tiers in the proposed PRD. Those could easily be separate zones if you guys wanted them to be.
The nice thing about having those 3 separate zones is that when they submit their plan to us, we can say this is appropriate for that area or not.
Well, so the zone as we outline it right now actually does that based on the street it's on. I don't think we need to have 3 separate zones.
If we fix the language.
If we fix the language.
Because right now it doesn't, right now it's
Okay.
very vague.
But yeah, so basically, this would qualify for the highest, whatever that ends up being, density, because it is on the Antelope Arterial.
And that was the Planning Commission's findings, is that this was a different
Plus it's
place.
next to commercial as well.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't see where you could get a second curb cut in there, because it's too close to the other road.
Yeah.
And that is a big concern, to be dumping out onto an arterial that goes directly, well, you've got school on one side and you've got homes on the other, and you've just increased your traffic.
But if we put commercial along there, are we gonna get enough curb cuts for potentially what could go along there?
The curb cuts will probably be the same regardless, and with my understanding of UDOT, they would like to have one curb cut where I'm kind of pointing right
Next
there,
to
right,
Pearson Auto.
right, and then Pearson would share
And
that
share
with
it with
them.
the businesses.
Okay, and then you can kind of
And
see on Banbury where
Pearson-
that existing little stub is right there too.
Corinne?
And the Pearson Auto owner, he was at the Planning Commission meeting, and he said that would help his business as well to access the back part of his lot, so that he can move his business back around the back.
Interesting.
But nothing right now prevents that curb cut from just being, he owns the property, so he could curb cut to the side, leave the lot commercial, and still access his PRD. So there's no reason, we don't have to change that to PRD for him to get a curb cut.
He's just trying
the
to put
same
in.
owner.
He's just trying to put in another.
He's just trying to put in
another
additional
couple buildings
houses.
of.
Right. And I'd like to leave that as commercial on Antelope Drive. I can't imagine that between 2 existing businesses will be better off if we put apartments on the side of a business. I
Not
don't think
apartments.
that helps. Okay, whatever's there. I don't think that high density housing, for the most part, let's face facts. A lot of people who have a house on Antelope would like to get rid of that because it's way concerning to be on Antelope Drive and a private residence. So I just don't know why we would turn something too residential from general commercial.
I guess I'd love to hear. Is there a huge market for townhouses on busy roads?
Yeah.
There is?
One
I didn't know this.
Well,
thought of why he might be wanting to change some of that frontage to PRD is because then it will reduce the curb cuts, because the entrance would be to one direction or the other in the back behind, and not directly onto Antelope. And then it actually makes its own little community there.
Well, to Dave's point, he owns the land now. He could make that curb cut now,
Right.
and we
not
could
have to change the commercial.
and put that road in now.
He has to get permission from UDOT, I believe.
Well, yeah, but he'd have to get your permission then too.
But that doesn't change whether that's zoned commercial or PRD. That curb cut has no effect on that change.
And I do remember in Planning Commission that the applicant explained that his desire is to do a townhome product where they would have the flexibility to do a business on the first floor. So it'd be a rear garage, so the entrance would face south, and then the first floor would have a business. So he on his application, if you see what he says, like, called it mixed use, but that's what he meant by mixed use.
and that would be somewhat appealing to me because I kind of agree with what Dave's arguing, because that could be appealing commercial property. but it hasn't been for the past 10 years anywhere along Antelope. Anywhere along Antelope. So I don't, the piece of the argument that I can maybe buy into is that the West Davis corridor changes that. And then the other thing, so right now I don't necessarily have a problem with him pushing up forward to Antelope. The piece over here by Sheldon Tex, though, I do question that a little bit, because I think that could be in our near future as a possible place for more office space or for something.
Out of all of that land, that is on the corner, that is the highest commercial, potential.
That area is prime commercial.
So yeah, I don't want to give up that whole strip there on the other side of the road.
Okay, but again, the application is
For that whole thing.
for the whole change. It is, we don't get to pick and choose.
Yep.
It's either accept, deny, or table. And so, as is, I have to deny.
In the past, and maybe Paul can weigh in, applications, you guys have the legislative power to change the zoning and the general plan. So in the past, I know that the city council has approved part of it and some of it not. So
I think if the applicant agrees with it, I don't think it's a problem. I mean, if the applicant says, please don't do that, and you do it, you can change the zoning. I wouldn't recommend it unless the applicant says, yeah, please do, because it's their application.
But doesn't the applicant have the opportunity to amend their application?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So I would wait for that. I mean, we're not voting tonight anyway, but as is, I would vote no. If he wanted to amend his application, we could talk about it. But there's no way right now that I would take that west side of Banbury and approve that as PRD.
Me either.
Same.
So it sounds like you, not just using the word, because we're not actually voting, to table this until we can talk to the developer.
Okay.
Can we
And
give
put it on another
instruction to the developer, or are we allowed to be specific? I believe we're not. Are we?
I think
We are?
I think you've expressed your concerns, and I think Noah can convey those, and he can listen. And
Staff
Staff
can?
we staff can
And I can't help but notice we're cutting a house in half with the zone there.
it's just the line width. It would
Just
go
that
to
thick
the west
magic
of that
marker
home.
line.
That's the west of that home?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's essentially 3 homes that would be excluded from that. And I have spoken with the applicant, and he says that he's willing to, in his words, he says he wants to make this something that everybody likes and agrees on. So I think he would probably be amenable to that, but I can't speak for him.
Yes, but you have enough information from this council that I think you can represent the council.
Yes.
I think okay to work with them.
Okay,
Okay.
let's take item number 2.
Item number
Back
2.
to number 2.
Oh, that H2.
Oh, we're going back.
We're going back.
Okay.
Which is
All right.
Rezone industrial and
H2O.
business park.
All right,
Page
so
number,
this
page number.
this is an important application, and it's a little different than what we're accustomed to. This is what we'd call a self-initiated zoning map amendment, and this is not common because usually an applicant comes to us. This is, in this case, the city wanted to have a conversation here tonight about the future of this area. So this is the corner of 1000 West and 193. Currently, you can see that you have U.S. Cold Storage, you have Pacific Steel, you have IPW, which is like pipe fitting stuff, and then you have a 7-Eleven going in here, and you have 2 what we call spec business park buildings. And
Excuse me?
Flex, thank you. And then you have about 9.5 acres here. So the general plan, this is the existing general plan. The purple color denotes business park. The permitted uses in business park are different than the permitted use in the industrial. So if you look at the existing zoning is industrial. And then the business park has some differences. One such difference would be storage units is a big difference between those 2 zones. So it's up for discussion of whether or not the city feels like the restricted uses of business park would be appropriate, for the area. You kind of have two scenarios. One scenario is under the current zoning, there's a lot of market demand for those uses that are permitted in the industrial zone. So you may be able to have investment in the area quickly, but it may not be 100% congruent with what the area was planned for, or general plan for at least. But then the other scenario is, you know, if we were to change the zoning, essentially in anticipation of holding out or waiting for maybe that bigger land use that we would hope for, it may be years. We don't know. You know, it could result in vacant property for more years, or you know, so you have those two scenarios. The landowner is here. The planning commission acted on this application. They recommended to not change the zoning based on a number of findings. Mainly it was related to not wanting to interfere with basically the private property owners' plans for the area. I think that pretty well covers
Before
it.
you open this discussion, I'd like Brody to intervene here for just a minute, and then maybe invite the applicant in.
Okay. So we've had some meetings with the landowner, as Noah mentioned. So I'd like to just kind of throw out to the council some of the things we've discussed, and see what you think. And I'm going to come up to the screen because it'll be easier to point it out. I'm sorry you won't be able to see me, Corinne.
You can turn the camera.
Selfie mode.
Extreme selfie.
Hey.
Does this move?
She's there
I don't know
looking at
if you
ceiling
can
or
see
at
it.
you, one of the two.
Yeah.
You look good.
Can you see the TV?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So, as I said, we've had discussions with the landowner, and they have the property under contract with a company, a group here that's here tonight, that would like to do some storage units. And one of the ideas we discussed, and we do not have confirmation from the other parties that they're on board with this yet, but there's some indication that they might. Where if the storage units, let me back up. This whole piece is under contract, right?
So that's the 9 acres.
That's the 9 acres. Yes.
And maybe explain what their original plan was for the property too. Just
Well, their original plan was 2 more buildings just like that, right?
Yeah, the original subdivision under the Giza development included 2 more buildings like this. So there was total 250,000 square feet, roughly.
It'd be another 39,000 square foot plus another 100,000 square foot building.
Okay.
So they would be different.
Right. So that was the original plan. Because of some of the business decisions they have to make, they're looking to get some cash out of the property to finance some things, and so what we talked about today actually was doing a partial sale of the property. It ranged from 5 to 7 of the 9 acres, something like that. The storage units with some architectural treatments could be located on the southern portion of the lot. There was discussion of possibly building 3 being built, and then along frontage of 193, what we call I guess that's what a flex, is that the type of flex?
It's like a smaller flex, office
Small
warehouse.
Flex, like office warehouse. If you've seen the small business units that are located in that first building on the vault,
Yeah.
where they have like a
Yes.
like a business frontage on the front, and they have a large garage entrance on the back, and they're like between 2,000 and 5,000 square feet. They're really small. But a lot of these smaller businesses and contractors like them because it's some storage space and office space. But they can be built to look really nice. And we thought that if everybody's on board with that kind of a plan, you can do a legal instrument like a development agreement where all the parties agreed to do something like that, and then the city signs off on it, and we can move forward with that. So we wanted to pitch that idea to you. I think we're going to let the landowners speak if they want, but that was an idea. Do you want the council to discuss that first, or
No, I'd like to hear from. I'd like us to hear from Phil and Mike and Stu.
Okay.
Oh, Michael Wright is with Giza. He's the primary developer. I'm an investor, and I'm kind of passionate about what's going on here, so I'd like to address you first. My name is Phil Cook. I'm a real estate appraiser by trade. I've been doing that for 38 years, predominantly commercial real estate. And when I looked at this project and invested in it, I thought this is going to work really well. We're right by the Freeport Center. Freeport Center is 97% plus occupied, and relatively close to the freeway. Beautiful piece of property. It hasn't worked as well as we would have liked because the tenants aren't flocking to us. We've had a really hard time filling these buildings. So when you develop, there are other pressures besides just getting buildings up and trying to get them leased. You also have a bank that is getting interest payments, and you anticipate leasing your buildings so you can make those interest payments. Well, we're out of reserve. We're not full here. We only have 8,100 of this 48,000 square feet leased. And so we're getting this pressure. So we start looking for options, and we decide selling this land may be the best option for us. And it happens that it's in an industrial zone. You saw the zoning map earlier. All of this area is zoned industrial, and even though your general plan calls for business park, everything that's been built there fits in the industrial zone, not in the business park zone. Even our buildings don't work very well in the business park zone. Which I've been looking over the ordinance for that zone, and it's very restrictive. It would preclude at least one of our existing tenants and one opportunity we think we might have to land another tenant, because they're neither permitted or conditional uses. And so what we built in good faith in an industrial zone to be able to go after those types of tenants won't work if you rezone this property. We found a buyer that would be willing to buy this land, and they would be willing to do, well, they want self-storage. That's really what they want to do. But in discussions we had with the mayor, with Brody, with Noah, we agreed we could work something out that would be favorable to the city, which is maintaining some architectural integrity along 193 that's similar in architectural design and features to the two buildings we have. And that's where this smaller flex concept came up. But if this gets rezoned to preclude any kind of self-storage, it also precludes any other type of continuation of this project. We cannot build buildings 3 and 4 if this gets rezoned, because you limit the tenant types that we can bring in, and we're already struggling. We have this pool to draw from, and a BP zone limits us to this pool. And this has one access in. It's right here. We're not going to get access in all likelihood of 193. So we want to have one access opportunity. We're not going to attract the types of businesses. Even the vault types of businesses are going to be harder to lease to, we think, because they're going to have to come in this way. Yet we're willing to do that in order to get this land sold so that we can do self-storage, which is really pretty compatible with these heavier industrial uses, not heavy industrial, but heavier industrial uses that we have adjacent to us. And rezoning kills us. It really kills us on this property. So we recognize that. We came to the Planning Commission. We said, look, this is not a good thing for us. Planning Commission voted unanimously to suggest that this rezone request by the city doesn't get approved. But we felt like we needed to be proactive here and come to the city and say, let's work together on this. the only way I can think to work together is to enter into development agreements so that you're comfortable that we have what you want, which is architectural continuity, but we get what we need, which is the sale of that land. Mike, what else? You covered.
Okay, council. I'll extend this 10 minutes and let's discuss it.
And I don't.
We also have Bear River here. Sorry.
The potential buyer might have something.
Great. Well, I would point out that the council didn't originate this, so I really liked what Giza presented the first time, but that doesn't mean that everything always develops that way. I understand you built a couple of buildings first and it started there. I think the only contesting voice I have about storage units is there are storage units and then there are storage units. And I mean, on the one hand, you've got tin sheds with gravel around them that are completely unsecured and attract high problems. And then you've got your ones that are completely walled in or even completely indoor temperature controlled. I mean, the spectrum is so wide. So what I would ask is, what do we have in the current zoning that controls at least some minimum standards to make sure we're not getting the absolute worst of what a storage shed can be, which is a all tin building with no, you know, I mean, other than just somebody telling us that, do we have things in the ordinance that says that that's not going to be?
Let me recognize Bear River. They have some pictures of what they've done in the past.
Thanks for your time.
Okay.
These are actually some facilities we have built in Provo, so I can just pass these around. We are brick and mortar. We don't do just a metal facade. This is on 820 North here, and then there's another one on State Street in Provo. So we're with you. I mean, you hear storage units and you think, ugh, not us, right? Well, we try and curb that by going a little above and beyond.
I don't have a problem with that.
So on the same point, I personally am in favor of, we need to try and make sure that we are business friendly and that we can attract as many types of businesses as possible within the zone. So I would actually like to leave it industrial, but I do want to amend the current zoning such that we do detail what type, like we say storage sheds, but to Dave's point, that could mean anything. I think we do need to add in some qualifying features of what we expect for those storage sheds with the architectural standards and all of that, because right now it's not clear if that applies. And then, yeah, if there's something like this, I'm good.
Yeah, if what was going to be built there is what you just showed us, I'm not concerned.
Yeah.
I am concerned, as I always am, that we leave the ordinance open to the possible bait and switch. And that is not a reflection on any person individually. It's a reflection of history that when we leave it open, somebody takes advantage.
You're saying, so I see what you're saying.
So
but
whatever we do,
we need to clarify.
We need to make it clear, not because of what these guys are proposing, but so that somebody doesn't come in, 6 months from now and say, hey, you said storage units, and I'm going to put up 10 skeletons, and I'm not even going to put in, maybe a little road base around them. We're good.
So we just want the zoning updated. I would
so
also
that part has to be controlled.
Okay, I can answer.
Let me add one more thing. The other aspect that I want to add in this is I would like on this type of especially with storage sheds, I'd like an acreage of limit of continuous storage sheds. If we want to have a few pockets, what I don't want, and they're not going to do this based on what we've just heard,
50 acres.
is 10 acres of continuous storage sheds. So I would like to see some limitation on that. But where they're willing to do the frontage with the nice office space and storage sheds in the back, I want to leave it as industrial and
Lisa,
go with
you
this.
want to comment?
Yes, I think that anytime we can help somebody stay in business, that's our job to do what we can to help them. And I understand that sometimes people don't rent your space, and you do what you can, and we need to be a partner in that to allow them to sell that portion of their land and do what they can to not have a blighted area. So
You know, at the same time, adding some quality storage might make the other property even more appealing because there is some, you know, functional storage nearby, or may make other commercial properties more appealing that there's some storage nearby.
And I've had a lot of requests for storage in Syracuse, oddly enough. So this
I don't
actually
know that
is.
people recognize that this area is Syracuse. I didn't until I saw where this is located. I think most people consider this Clearfield, so we should maybe advertise that somehow.
Corinne?
I just wanted to say I'm so pleased that the developer, both the buyer and the previous one, were willing to look at doing the flex space to make it all work. Thank you very much. I wish I could see the proposed pictures there, or not necessarily proposed, but but the pictures looks great.
Thank you, Vanna.
I love it. And white.
Doug?
Looks great.
Yeah, so I got a
Thank you
different.
for both of you. I just wanted to tell you, both of you, that looks really good.
My thinking is going a different route, but maybe others were thinking this too, and that is, so I don't. The architectural continuity is not a big deal to me. Honestly, I love that. You could put the metal ones, and I don't have a problem with storage units. And I appreciate the compromise that you've all been willing to have, like Corinne said. But when this was created, there was a thought of tax base, increase our tax base, and our potential for jobs within our city. So I don't know if this is a question for staff or the developers, but how does this change that? Because maybe these big office or these big warehouse spaces weren't going to create a lot of jobs anyway. I don't know. And I don't know what the tax base is on self-storage versus something else. Maybe educate me on that.
I can answer that.
Noah?
And these guys can too. So, for example, the projects that EDCU advertises, sometimes we don't have a good chance at landing them, but they're talking about, I mean, if we're talking about property taxes and what the city gets from the value of the buildings, Project Flower, which is one that's in the pipeline, is a $26 million investment. Okay, and the storage unit, roughly $5 million investment, $6 million. So as far as the taxable value that comes back to the city, it underperforms compared to what could be. But the question is, you know, do we hold out? And then maybe it doesn't ever materialize. I don't know what the buildings, those two spec buildings cost to build, but you know, assuming if you're comparing two columns side by side, two more of those buildings, we know that the storage unit's value in the buildings are going to be less than what they would have provided. And then if you keep with the columns of, you know, comparison of jobs, the storage units might have 5 to 10 jobs, where, you know, some of these projects might have 50, 60 jobs or more. We don't know exactly what would actually happen. So that's where the compromise, those other land uses, kind of helps compensate for the underperforming. So there's kind of there's the 3 points of evaluation, and these guys are probably sick of me talking about these 3 points because we've talked to them about it. But there's jobs, there's property taxes, and there's architecture. So architecturally, you know, they've showed us some pretty pictures, and I think they could probably make it pretty continuous. That, you know, it looks pretty good. Jobs still underperforming, and taxable value is still underperforming compared to other uses.
Phil, I noticed you wanted to
Yeah,
comment.
I disagree with the assessment on tax, the tax issue. The property taxes, these storage units rent for quite a bit more per square foot than the type of product we built, and income drives value. So the higher your income, the higher the value. I think your property tax base is going to be higher with what we're now suggesting we can do than it otherwise would be. And I'll tell you, buildings 3 and 4 may not be built. They'll eventually be built because you're going to have West Davis corridor, and
Highway 193 is gonna get better, and eventually those are gonna be in the map. But 5 years out, I don't know. And the idea that we could land Project Flower, I think, is just, it's highly speculative. It's not gonna happen. And I saw the email where, you and ECD said, very slim chance. And so a small developer like Mike is, and small investors that went in with Mike can't sit there and hope for a home run. We just can't. And so I think, frankly, we hit your tax base. Even the smaller flex units out in front will rent for more than what our units are renting for. So there's more value, taxable value, tax base, with this plan than with what we were going to do, in my opinion. And I do
compromise, I want to kind of go back to that and say that when Ninigret was first proposed and all of the things that were supposed to go in it and the 100,000s of jobs that were supposed to go in, it's completely not that anymore. Most of the businesses that have come have not been high jobs. They've been lower, so it's way underperformed on the jobs. I think that what we need to do going forward is accept that all of our eggs are not in that basket. This is why I'm really concerned when we talk about giving up land that is general commercial, like something that's close to our town center, because we need the variety of offerings in order to pick up the other taxable entities. Will it sell today? Probably not. There are other general commercial lands in the city that people come to us and say, I want to convert those to residential and do high density. And to which I say, well, wait a minute. We have to be very cautious getting rid of those and just letting them all go, because we need a variety of buckets to possibly capture this. We can't just consider that this property, you know, with whatever space is left, is going to suddenly make up for the deficit that was already there on that land to begin with. We didn't get the jobs out of this, out of any of those businesses that we expected. So we can't be putting all of our faith there.
Council, would you be okay if I authorize staff to work with both the buyer and the seller in this agreement and see what we can work out and bring back a proposal to you? Paul has informed us that we can do a development agreement between us and them, and see if we can't have a win-win-win all the way around.
I'd be very happy to see a possible development agreement and to see what we could come up with.
Okay.
You too.
Corinne?
And it may not require us to do anything.
I would say the benefit of going that route is I think we can do it. I think this is a benefit for the landowner and the buyer, is we can do that faster probably than we can on discussing like the zoning changes, which we probably should do anyway, is what you're saying. But if they had to wait for us to get all the details done on architectural requirements for light industrial, that might kill their project too.
I think the development agreement's fine.
Yeah, that if the development agreement is acceptable to everybody, let's go that route.
It might help us figure out what we need to have in there anyway.
Okay.
As far as the architecture, I could real quick answer the question about the process for industrial buildings that falls under the architectural review chapter, so that there is some review and some standards for industrial buildings, and I'd be happy to forward that.
Mr. Sorensen, I know that you wanted to have something.
I just have a quick question on, we're good with that. We're just concerned on the third building being a requirement. Is the council open to something like a car dealership or some other use for, because basically this would be split up in, you'd have the storage facility and then you'd have the flex space right on 193, and then on the east side of that property is where we'd have to figure that out. Are we open to some other ideas than the third building that hasn't produced for them? We just don't want to go.
A car dealership actually sells it for me. It does, because I want jobs in the tax base, and that's sales tax based.
Yeah, it is a big sales tax producer.
If you're just open to options, then we're more comfortable to move forward in that direction.
So options, yes, I'm comfortable with options.
Okay.
Any option? No, we'll have to talk about it.
Right, sure. Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I would So would that be to supplant the storage sheds?
Maybe. Oh, no,
To-
no,
what's
it's
that?
for the third
No,
building.
no.
Just
it-
for
it-
Just
just-
the third building.
Because if it's one of these little houses with like 8 cars
No.
around a used car lot, I'm not okay with that. If it's going to be a car
Sizable.
dealership, it needs to be something
Yeah, it
legitimate.
would be a sizable 2 to 3 acre on the east side, or whichever side we figure out.
You know,
For a
I'm gonna-
building, we're just leery because they've.
I'm going to call the discussion on this for this evening and direct
Great.
staff
Yeah, thank you.
to meet with
Thank you.
both the seller and the
We'd
buyer.
love to work with you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys' time.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at number 5.
I don't know.
We're at number 5.
H5.
We are definitely somewhere. H5 PRD.
What
All
page
right.
is that on yours?
I don't know.
You know how,
What
there
I
it
do-
is, I found it.
But here's what I do.
I try and look at it like that.
so-
and find
so
it.
we're-
Noah, hang on just a minute. While we've got Giza here, let's move to item number.
Oh, okay.
I got so many arrows. I'm like, let's go to item D, unless we're going to limit the discussion. We're not going to go 20 minutes.
Wait, what's this?
This is on
Oh,
incentivizing.
item D.
Oh, item D.
We're moving back to item D.
What page on the packet are we on there?
Item D, possible incentive package for Antelope Business Park.
Look at that, Jordan. I found it that fast because of the new wave talk.
Good.
Normally I'd be just
Wait,
pushing look.
D?
There we go.
Are you following us, Corinne?
Okay.
We're on page 70 of the packet.
Item D, discussion of incentive package for Antelope Business Park.
Okay, so to piggyback off of our previous discussion, as they've stated, they ran into issues leasing space within buildings 1 and 2. So, and we've talked about this previously as a council as well. And what we've came back with is a little bit more detail of how
Okay, can I ask really quick?
Sure.
If the action that we just kind of agreed to, doesn't that take care of the immediate need? Besides, I mean, we can talk about this still, but I just want to know if we're beginning from a standpoint where they're not an immediate pressure or they are.
It's a good
still.
question.
It's a good
Yeah,
question.
we can cover it.
So is what this would do, if they were to lease up building 2 space quickly, it increases the chances that they continue on with building 3. And I know that we were okay with the car lot dealership and, to put those in scenario columns, car dealership.
Really, I'm more
has-
concerned that are we in a place where these people are about to just leave because they failed, or are we talking about a position where we're helping them just solidify?
This helps this helps them fill up the buildings in I think they need
Which he said they
both.
were 8 out of 40,000, right? Is that what he said?
We've got 40,000 square feet available in
And
building
8.
2.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So-
8,000 only.
Can I ask an abstract question before we dig too far into this?
Okay, yeah.
From a hypothetical standpoint, if Freeport is 93% full and we're 10%?
That
Ish.
building.
50%.
What's that?
50%?
50%. Okay. Is there something we're doing that is making it so it's more difficult for us to rent the space?
Great question.
Probably just more expensive.
Freeport rents for half of what we do because those buildings were built circa 1940, 1950.
That's true, they're World War II era.
Yeah, these buildings that they've built are really nice, and we
Yeah.
have architectural standards, which, windows and
That's a
trim,
good
there's
point.
there's a
It's a
balance.
cost.
So
Mhm.
so
It's a
they
good
cost
point,
more, but
okay.
it also makes the building lease rate higher. So is what
Right.
this incentive would do would essentially bring that lease rate to be more competitive. Now, Freeport Center, I mean, those are old, nasty buildings, but at the same time, they're more affordable, and so they're direct competition even in other places that are a little bit more comparable, or it's closer to 50 something cents per square foot, 55 cents per square feet. So because of whatever reason, the cost that it took them to build their buildings, their current lease rate is 65 cents a square foot. So what the proposed structure would be is to help that bring down the lease rate to around 50 cents, which would be very competitive in the marketplace and help them fill up the buildings. Okay, and then that would give a higher probability that they would be willing to invest in
So
building
to
number
get people
3.
in, that's not a problem. The question really becomes how long. Because we have a limit because of the structure of the EDA. So that's one
2028.
fixed limit. But beyond that, the question is, do we have to go to the max of that just to make this happen? Because part of that really, we have talked a long time about that would be incentive to help jobs. So if these turn out to be low jobs, do we have to go the full distance on everything or not? That's the question.
We definitely want jobs, and the flex space, you know, it varies depending on who's leasing it out, right? And that's why within what we're imagining, and this is why we're having this conversation, is that, and this is just something we're throwing out there. If they have more than 10 jobs, we could increase the amount.
That's what we talked about last time, was the idea that if it were higher jobs, there'd be higher incentive.
So it'd be like
and I'm okay
15
with
cents
that,
for higher.
because that does what we want it to do.
And I'd even be willing to add an extra incentive in there if they're higher paying jobs. You know, if it's 30 people making minimum wage, that's less appealing to me than say 20 people making 80, 90, 100 grand.
And realize who approaches them is not something we control. I'm just saying that we would, I mean, what we talked about in our last meeting, to kind of bring it right up to speed, is the more that it appeal that it has to the city, the higher the incentive, and we're willing to do that.
So would you want to add a third tier?
Possibly.
What if you did, so the base is 10 cents a square foot.
Yeah.
If it's more than 10 jobs, you can go up to like 12. If the jobs are of a certain
Higher pay
threshold,
rate,
they
15?
can get the full 15.
Yeah,
I'm good with that.
I like that.
I am too.
10, 12,
That does what
15.
we want it to do.
That would help us a lot. I think that would be great.
That helps us a lot.
Okay, this is.
And can we advertise that tomorrow?
Well, we can't
vote on it tonight, but that would be the thing.
This is the piece that bothers me.
You can whisper.
And I understand that this
Fair
is
enough.
maybe not a business kind of thing. This is probably an oldest child complaining to my parents kind of thing. We're going to give this to anybody comes in new, and all the existing people are sitting there paying the old rates. There's an unfairness factor.
You're right, there is, and yet what we're doing is we're stabilizing. Well, no, what we're doing is we're stabilizing something that we need to succeed in, and really it's saying to those other people who are here and maybe pay the original rate, they're not going to end up in, with new ownership because it went into bankruptcy or something. Like, we're stabilizing their opportunity.
That's a policy, a city policy thing, that's a good argument, but
doesn't help the
they're
oldest
gonna
child.
I don't think they're gonna come to the city. They're gonna come to them and say, what about us? I think. I don't know.
Well, isn't there a parable
I don't
about
know
that?
I don't know that they even have 10 jobs, so it may not be an issue.
So it probably isn't.
I think that's an issue everywhere, in every city, that where there's TIF funding or whatever.
Or impact fees for storm drains.
Yeah, and I knew that'd be the discussion, but I had to bring it up because it just feels unfair.
Too. Tough.
Yeah. I was the oldest kid, and that was
You agreed to a certain rate when you went to pick the olives. Isn't that how this goes? That there's a parable of, it doesn't matter when you came into the play, you agreed to what your rate was, and you can't complain after that.
She's right.
all right. That's the mom.
All right.
Answer.
Well, that's what we should also
That's the
produce
mom
$1 trillion.
answer.
That's right.
Okay, what I'm
I
hearing
do
then
not
is
love your brother more than I love you, I
what I'm
promise.
hearing is establishing a third tier. Is that
Yeah.
what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay,
10,
as
12,
outlined.
15, we'll
Yep.
bring it back. And we're thinking of like 5 years on average to, over a 5-year period.
Let's see what this looks like on paper before we guarantee the 5 years, but I think that sounds reasonable.
At 15 cents per foot incentive, and at 50,000 square feet, each year it's $90,000.
Okay. Well, like I said,
Over 5 years, it's
I wouldn't put this on common
$450,000.
consent, but I would say that we're definitely ready to go forward with something.
Okay.
Okay, you got
So
instructions?
that would be a max of 90,000.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back to 5.
I hope we can max at 90,000, have that many new high-paying jobs in the
Thank
city.
you, guys.
Thank you.
Back to 5. Noah.
Wait, where?
Now we're going to PRD.
Giddy up.
Anybody know what packet? Number
137.
page? Thank you. Those who are faster than
Okay, I found the table of contents.
It's like
so-
bingo.
That was the trick you
I
just
know.
showed me. That was
Okay.
worth money, I would pay.
I should.
You
I should have been
just
like,
missed an
you.
You can pay me
You-
because he's late on his friendship dues.
All right, we've been talking about this for a long time, and so we have a few paths going forward. We can, you know, if this is a sign that it's too hard to come to a consensus on anything, we can table this or wait. I'm perfectly fine with that. Or we can go on with what, you know, the current draft that, or I guess the last time's draft, or we could just vote no. We don't have to do this at all.
Okay, so I have some questions about specifics, but I, as a general rule, would love to put this to bed tonight.
Okay.
Whatever the outcome, I would love to be where we vote in the next meeting and we don't do this anymore.
And I'll give you 15 minutes.
Thanks.
You're giving him 15 minutes?
No,
Each.
all of you.
Hey, I had it. What'd you do? All right, so my first question is, why are we striking all dwellings units in the second paragraph are to be held in private individual ownership? Why is that being struck?
Because you can't enforce it.
So
It's true.
it's very difficult to enforce, and is what other cities have done is, you know, they can have a clause saying that they have something in their CC&Rs if that was really important to us, but that's still something that the
Well, we've
city,
talked several
it's very hard
times
to
that one of the concerns is when you do rental units versus some kind of owned units, the upkeep always extends better than rentals. But, so I'm just asking, is that really something? I mean, I understand if we're striking it because it's absolutely unenforceable, then that's not a bad reason. But the suggestion that what we plan for is ownership rather than rental properties, I don't think that's a bad suggestion.
Can I back up for a second? So I don't think you're gonna get through this whole ordinance in 15 minutes.
Why not?
You're just not. With 5 people with 5 different opinions.
If you don't take my 15 minutes, we will.
No, you won't. I have. Yeah. So anyway, what we thought about doing, and you can disagree and move on, regardless if you want, but we felt like you might get more progress on this if you want to continue on this ordinance. If we just focused on the one issue that's highlighted,
okay,
and that's density, and if we can focus, if you want to move forward with this ordinance, we felt like the last few discussions have gone all over the place, and we didn't get much progress. If we can nail down the big pieces, then I think we can cover all the little details.
The density is the big piece.
You're
so.
right, and it is, but the problem is, Brody, with what you're suggesting is, every time that we do that, we go back and rehash the old issues again and again. And I actually feel like we'd come to some agreement on some of those old issues, but they're not reflected in the document yet. So you open up that discussion one more time.
Well, I went and listened to the tape of the last meeting. There wasn't a consensus on density. There just not. There was discussion, but there was no consensus. And so that's why we want to nail it down.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to shoot kind of in the middle here where I feel like the consensus is, and that's what this.
I don't feel like that's at all in the middle.
Can I give a history bit? So I've been just fretting over this specific issue for several months now, and so I've gone and I've talked to some old council members, planning commission members, and so the history of this is originally this thing was set at 12, and the council at that time said they just said they were getting
that produced
so
Stone
many
Garden
requests
at 11.
and it was just insane. And they said, you know what, we do not want it here. And so they reduced it. Now, admittedly, that was uniform across the entire city. They could put it anywhere. And I think we've kind of worked to limit that in here. And then they reduced it down to 8. But again, 8 was ubiquitous across the entire city. And it slowed drastically to a manageable level, I would say. But then the council was even more strict, and they put it to 6, and no one wants to do anything with that. Now, some would probably say, well, that's just fine with me. And I've actually heard those arguments. But I've also heard that there is a middle ground. So for me, based on the conversations I had and the limitations based on arterials and collectors, I do think that something along a major arterial that has the sufficient infrastructure to support it can have a slightly higher density. So I would like to make the recommendation of on a collector road, it remains at where it is, at 6. Number 2, for a minor arterial, we go to something like 8, slightly higher. It's still got the infrastructure to manage it. And so along a major arterial like Antelope, the most I'm willing to go would be like 10. And I don't think I can go any higher than that.
I would add to that if we do adjust it to those, that we have, I don't like the language in those that says per acre allowed only when one of the following.
Yeah,
number.
it has to be multiple.
It has to be multiple.
Several, yeah, I agree.
It has to be both in the number 2, and in 3, it has to be multiple. I'd say as many as 3 out of 4, because I do not want them to say, oh, I kind of technically meet that one, so I'm getting the high density.
Yeah, can you provide some detail of what exactly those conditions would be?
They're written here, just the ones that are written.
So I'll name a few, like on
all
3. It first of all would have to have 2 arterials. It would have to be in the town center overlay, and it would have to have frontage that is owned and maintained by state transportation. If they can meet, for example, those 3, I was going to say 2, but if he wants 3,
You know, I'm a little bit flexible there, but the point is that one of those conditions is not enough. Yeah. It's got to be multiple.
What is the part you're a little flexible with?
Well, whether it's 2 or 3. I mean, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, is there a combination of 2 that are absolute, or does it leave it open? I'm just looking at it real quick.
So I'm okay with that if it's not what you just suggested on the number of units.
Okay, make a counter.
Yeah. Well, I think what we've got here is already a counter to what was proposed. I don't think 6, 10, and 14 is out of the realm of possibility, or what looks good and what can work in our city.
So I'm going to vote
in that case,
let's let Doug finish.
And in that case, for 3, for example, because I know people are scared about 14. Some people are scared about 14. All 4 of those can be met. And I'm okay saying that. 14 if all 4 of those are met.
Oh.
Corinne?
I would be in favor for that as well.
That's very
I just don't think 6, 8, and 10 is that much better than what we've got.
Well, right now we have 6.
I know.
They're at 12.
It just depends on what your intent is and what we're wanting to put in our tool belt.
I don't see any reason why we would ever go over 12 at this phase. And the reason really is that I think that if we decide that, hey, we've done 12 and it works, we're okay with it, then maybe we can relax it a little bit more. But I do not want to just open it right up. Yeah. That's why 16 was out, and for me, that's why 14's out.
So my approach here is the previous council panicked at 12. They completely panicked and dropped it all the way down. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm trying to do is, okay, so that council didn't think 12 was the right answer. Times have changed, admittedly. I would like to creep up on the right answer instead of overshooting and saying, whoa, that was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, you can't undo things. So let's let a 10-plex be built, and if we're like, That wasn't so bad.
ten-
But
Well,
not a
it's not a
10,
10
sorry, not a
plex.
10 plex, a 10 per acre, thank you. A 10 units per acre and say, did that work? And if that works, we can look but like I say, I'd rather creep up than overshoot and have to panic and try and pull it back.
Agreed.
But I've seen what 14 looks like, and I'm comfortable with that in the limited area that it could be placed.
Okay.
Well, we had, what was in Stoker's, 11?
11.
Stoker's is, 11 to 12.
Stoker's 11.
And it's plenty dense.
It is plenty
What
dense.
is-
Right.
Corinne?
Stoker's.
Corinne?
I was wondering, what is Sunset Villas? Remind us again.
Only 6.
Sunset Park Villas is 17.8 acres, has 116 units, and is 6.5 units per acre.
Okay, got it.
See, and that's not bad, but that's only 6.5.
And see, for me, on this chart that is up on the board, I don't know if you can see it, I have zero problem being
It's
the
in your packet.
lowest
It's
units
the
per
one
acre.
straight across from the elementary.
And-
Oh,
Just
it's
one.
only-
Yeah.
And,
It's in
and
the
this,
Dropbox.
this table is just townhomes, just to be clear.
Yeah.
So what you have, what you usually see for townhomes, you see on the lower end you have 11, and the higher end at 21. But if down in the 8 and the 10, you get products more similar to like what you see, even a step above Sunset Park Villas. So you're looking at like kind of 1-story fourplexes. If you're down in the 8, and maybe that's what you want. But if you want townhomes, you really need a minimum of at least, I'd say, 10 or 11.
So Noah, how did we get approval for 11 with what our PRD is
It was
now?
12
It
in
was,
the
at the
past.
time,
It
it
was
was
12.
At the
That's
time, it
right.
was 12.
11 or
So
12, I
they've
can't.
just bounced back and forth then
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah, it's
No.
it's a controversial
It's
Stoker's-
been over
issue.
10 years.
Stoker's wasn't built 10 years ago,
When was
3 years.
No.
I was involved in that. They got that higher density by applying for more open space and things like that.
Okay, so
Let's keep the
They were
discussion. Let's
six.
keep the discussion to the
Okay.
table.
But
Okay.
There was a bonus density program that enabled them
Wasn't
to go up.
usually either.
Okay.
So plug Stoker Gardens into this. They wouldn't get 14 out of this. Would they get 10
So
today? I
Under
mean, if
the-
we approve this.
yeah, under the
Good
current
question.
context, we can go through projects and tell you what ones they qualify for, but it would be at 10 right now.
See, and they're at 11, so I don't think that's that far off.
See,
So
that
that-
makes me more apt to approve 11 or 12 rather than 10, just because I've seen it, been through there, know what's coming in and out on that, on 1,000, and that is something that I think is a nice development.
Were you guys saying on the 10 that both of the conditions would be met?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So in that case, Stoker would not be permitted in that location.
because they aren't.
Because they're not next to general commercial.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm okay if it's, the general commercial is not so a big deal. So I just have to say it's at least one of in 2. But in 3,
That needs to
it
be a
needs to
couple
be at least 3 of the 4, at least.
Okay.
And I'm not comfortable taking 3 over 12, but maybe we do 6, 9, 12. Why does it have to be an even number?
6, 2.5.
I mean, that's just kind of a compromise between,
Yeah, if your purpose is to do townhomes, you'd be limiting the viability of townhomes in all areas except for number 3, and
And
to,
I don't have a
to
real
meet
problem
all
with
of
that.
those qualifications, you would be limited to the areas of the town center. So if that's your intent, you only want townhomes in the town center.
Well, or they have to have
No.
transportation.
no, or they
No,
could build
so
something
all
that's,
of those, so
or
you
they
would
could
not
be,
be able to go anywhere else.
they could build something that's like Sunset Villa, which they could
Okay.
still do.
Yeah, so for example, the property south of Smith's, right, that would be down to
Which
number
is not a
2.
PRD, so it wouldn't apply.
Doesn't apply. I'm just throwing out like examples.
Property south of Smith's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On 1,000 that we've talked about.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking
So
about.
that would be
3
limited,
acres.
or
It doesn't meet it either. It's 3 acres, so it's not even
that's
big
true.
enough.
Yeah,
And
and then
really
like
it's
Craythorns, that
not
would
a
be
good fit.
a 3.
So my question.
Well, actually, I don't
Okay,
know if it's
so
on
Ann?
town center.
I just have a question. Considering that 3 acres, if you don't want townhomes there, and the thought has been thrown out there of a mixed use, I really think that actually increases the traffic and the parking more than what it would be if it were some townhomes.
When you say mixed use, what do you mean?
Because that was a concern before with the impact on traffic to 1,000 and also the size of the area and the parking available and so forth. I think if you're going to pick some townhomes for there, that's better than doing apartments and mixed use where you're going to have more traffic through there.
And we still never came to a consensus on that piece of it, did we?
That's
On
next.
Yeah.
Mixed use is next.
So
That's
I
a
looked on the
different
map
ordinance.
for Craythorne's property. They are not in the town center zone, so they wouldn't qualify for the higher
So
density.
they would get 9.
And that, if that's your intent, I just want to make sure we all
Unless they
we're
did
talking.
3 out of the 4.
Yeah, maybe if you say 3 out of the
3 out of the 4, I think, and that's good. So I'm okay. So I think, and if people can agree, then we are 6, 9, 12, and with the zone 3, they have to meet 3 of the 4 qualifications. Did we just come to an agreement?
I know, you said it.
Sorry, what did you say?
I still liked
That's
the
not
idea
still
of
too much.
I'm okay creeping up on this.
I am.
I mean, if everyone else is supportive, I'll go along with it. But I really think that we should creep up on it instead of overshoot.
And the only reason I say that 12 is, to me, is creeping up is because I've seen the 11 at Stoker's and lived with it and feel like that's not something that I thought, oh my gosh, get that out of here, I'm so mad that was built. So I feel like it's, I don't think 12, to me, 12 doesn't seem over the top, especially for meeting 3 conditions.
Okay, so you're in
Yeah.
agreement. You're in agreement with Dave.
Because of what I've seen and what I can picture on what these densities really look like, I'm seeing 12 being okay. I'm even seeing 14 being okay along Antelope, because now we're saying Stoker Garden would be 10, would be limited to 10
Yeah, so they'd have to drop
because
one.
of where they are. But so in the spirit of compromise, if everybody's gonna do that, the 6, 9, 12, I might go for that. But in what I've seen and what I can picture, 6, 10, and 14 looking like, it does not scare me to put 14 in some very limited.
Admittedly, none of this is what I would consider high density based
Right.
on the definitions. This is still a medium density compared to what other cities are doing, and our high density is very skewed based on what we're seeing.
Used to. However, I do agree with Jordan where you say I would rather scale up than scale back, and so 12 to me is a good happy medium.
You guys will also see a future item coming up on a R4 kind of development that will be townhomes. I don't want to get us all distracted, but
Then don't.
You will see what 11 looks like.
So you're
I
saying
just want to throw in my 2 cents here.
Yes.
if I could. I do agree with Doug that along Antelope Drive and some of those higher traffic areas, where it is different than off the side like Stoker Gardens, 14 really is not that scary. And if you look at the good products that are out there, it would totally work. We're talking about townhomes and not apartments, and that's the appropriate place for it.
I'm comfortable going along with Jordan with 6, 8, 10, but I'm trying to offer a spirit of compromise. But if you guys are going to push for 14, then I can't go there. No way.
I think 6, 9, 12 is a compromise.
I think it's a compromise.
We've yeah.
Jordan, how are you?
I'll go along with it because I don't feel like this is high density, but I do want to creep up on it. And if this is as close as I can get to creeping, I'm willing to accept a compromise.
Corinne?
It sounds like that's what we're going to go for, and I think it's fine to creep. That's fine.
So can I ask a specific question? Mike Bastion's area down by Trailside, which of these does it?
His is number 2, because he has frontage on access upon arterial road.
I'm not
Okay,
sure.
so
I'm not
no,
ready to
then
go
we would
9
need,
there.
we would need to go with 2 things, because yeah, that comes back to I can't approve 10 units per acre there. So how do we, I'm comfortable with 6.
Well,
but
but we
why
also
I'm
don't
not-
have to put a PRD there. I mean, that's been
Okay.
the
Yeah,
discussion
that's-
tonight,
Is Bluff
right?
really an arterial?
It is on the future road classifications. Right now it's...
Well, it's gonna be a dead end.
So maybe our
I think
future
we need to
road
update Bluff Road from being an arterial to a collector.
To be a collector.
Yeah, or you could just change the definition to say, you know, under the current
What if you said a minor
classification. Yeah, or you can say minor. But this is under the if you look under the asterisk, it says proposed street network. You could just say current street network, and that would change the Bluff Road down to the 6 units per acre.
Okay, because yeah, I do agree that one, I don't think 10 is a good fit there.
No.
I think you.
Well, we're 9.
So if it was 6 units to the acre, would everybody be okay with that?
Are we allowed to
I just
say?
wanted to throw it out there.
We aren't allowed to
That's why I
say.
changed
I won't
it.
say anything.
I'm going to table discussion on this.
Okay.
It sounds maybe like that, Mike. But let's go on.
So I would say this though, if we just came to some kind of collective agreement, can we at least update the document that far?
Yes, let's.
Yeah, that was the point.
That's
Can I do
point.
one other thing? I know that you had brought up connected units. Did you want to discuss that briefly?
We don't have time tonight.
6
Let's-
versus 4?
Let's stay
We
with
can vote
just.
to extend the conversation.
Pardon?
We have the option to vote to extend the conversation, don't we?
Mayor's in charge.
Yeah, what I'm saying is in the economy of time, we've got probably about 2 hours of information yet we've got to disseminate.
But we
Okay.
did agree that when we had these meetings that we could vote to extend any conversation. It would take 3 of us to agree. I would love to put this behind us. I don't think there's that much more to discuss.
Well, I thought we had arrived pretty much at 6, 9, and 3.
I know,
That's
but
what I was
6, 9,
hearing.
and
I mean the whole ordinance.
Just for connected units, I know that David talked to me about 6 versus 4.
Yeah, I don't like 6-plexes, 5-plexes, but
I think there's way too much beyond this. I don't think we can get it done tonight. I think we've bit off
I
a
don't know
big
that
piece
there's
here
much
that,
left, but
Okay, I mean, if
well,
we
there's
wanna-
gonna be a healthy discussion on acreage.
is there?
Sounds like it.
There has before.
But okay, so I think, is there, I mean, if that's the only other point you think there's gonna be discussion on, we could be done with this. If we give ourselves a few more minutes.
And
Is there
connected
any other
units.
points? Connected units and acreage. And
There's height and in lieu of fee for common space. Unless
I
you're-
thought we already agreed to.
Unless
no
everybody's
common
okay with
space.
how it's written.
I mean, I'd be okay if it wasn't in there at all, but the way it is fine.
I was okay with it.
Yeah.
So we're down to connected units and acreage, and I think that could be done quickly. So I would make a suggestion that we extend the conversation and finish this.
I'd like to get it done.
I would too.
Okay, go ahead.
For the sake of the developers.
So I only, on the number of units,
You've got 10 minutes.
I'm against 6-plex and I'm against 5-plex, but 5-plex is weird. But
Hey, if
how
you're
does
building
everybody
it-
else feel?
If it's 9 per acre, I mean, you might have to figure out how to fit that odd one in there.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think you're wasting space in between buildings if you restrict that to 4-plex, sorry.
I just always feel bad for the guys in the middle.
Yeah, but again,
I lived in a 6-plex in Florida and it was awesome. We loved it. And we were in the middle unit.
Well, let's just, to be in the interest of time, just give a quick rundown. If I'm the only one, then it doesn't win.
I'm okay with 6 again because I've seen how it looks.
You okay
I'm
with
okay
6?
with 6.
Okay,
I've
it's
seen
over.
it.
We
Okay.
got 6 is accepted. Now acreage. I'm okay to back off and leave it where it is,
A 5?
at 5.
I think it's too high. It doesn't address some.
I think it's
Agreed.
very important.
I think smaller areas like that 3 acre fits the townhome area. Sorry. But it's going to be less traffic than if you put in a whole bunch of other stuff.
I don't.
I don't believe in the no limit. I believe there should be some. What the minimum is, I don't know.
Could you agree to leave it at 5 where it is today and not address it?
I could leave it at 5. I was actually gonna go. There's a couple spots that I do think that where 4 could fit.
So could we have that discussion when they come up for application and not have to deal with it on this ordinance change?
So leave it at 5 for now, and if
Leave it at
anybody
5,
has
and if somebody makes an application, we
application,
could
we
consider
can
the
consider.
application.
Does the current ordinance allow for
I
that?
don't think you can do that.
No, if it says a
Then
minimum acreage of 5 acres and it doesn't have 5 acres, it's going to be a
They
short
have- they
review
have to get a
process.
variance.
Okay, so the
Yeah,
last
they'd have to
time,
apply for a zone text
Arbitrary on
change.
that kind of
but
stuff.
the last time we had one that was 4.7, we went through to this council and discussed it, whether they could have that variance. So to me, if they could do it then, they could do it in the future.
They didn't get a variance, they added
They
more
didn't,
property.
but they had the right to discuss it, and that's what I'm saying. If they have the right to discuss it then, they had the right to discuss it now.
They were requesting, I think, a text change.
Yeah, it was a text change, it wasn't a variance.
A zone-
This body doesn't address variances.
Okay, so we could have a text change if it comes up.
Yes. They could apply for it.
So can we leave it there for now?
I'd rather go lower with a statement that says, or leave it there with a statement that says we can address.
And
I
do
don't know
we
if that's legal or not.
do we want to have the acreage be dependent upon units inside it?
I think we probably do, but I don't want to address that tonight if we could be done.
Well, I have a problem when we get little spots here and there and here and there, and then we have, 2 little sixplexes over here, and
That's
then.
not fair to everybody around them.
Yeah.
I
It
agree.
lowers their
So I think
property
there needs to
value.
be some general, 5 acres
Yeah.
is a substantial enough unit that your developers, it's worth developing for them. It doesn't go out of control
I think-
with
I
impact.
only say 4 because I know a few places in the city where that could work.
I agree with what you're saying. I
I'm
just
gonna
don't want to
disagree
limit
with
some
four.
of those singletons that, what else are we gonna do? There.
Well, I'm not
They,
gonna,
they could build an R1 like they're zoned now.
Corinne, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if 4 is where the compromise is on this one, then that's where we need to go. Because it sounds like that's where the compromise is.
I
Well,
see where
only
you're
I've
going.
said 4. I guess you said 4 too, right?
Well, I
Yeah.
I don't want, well, for sure not 3. That turns into a little pocket of houses here and there and everywhere.
I'm gonna
That's fine.
argue that
If
every one that
you
I've
are
looked
for
at
3,
is
that's
4,
fine. If we wanna go,
probably ought
I'm
to
just
come up
saying
with
that
another
that's the
acre,
compromise
because
spot, let's go there.
because think about where those 4s are. They are not, in order to get 4 to be successful, 4 would have to be on a major, they'd have to meet the conditions of 3 so that they could be really tall. And we don't have that. Those 4s are on secondary roads.
I brought up the
Which one do you
table.
think?
I don't know if this
The
is
one next
helpful,
to the
This
liquor
is
store.
helpful.
but you can see what the average project size of common
Isn't, I think
townhome
there's rooms
developments
of
are.
5 there.
Right
So
now it's
if
like
it was
4.5.
at 5, you would have 2 that would qualify. At least there's lots of townhome developments. You'd have
That's
to
the only
actually
Go
one I
with
think of.
5 and we can come back to it if that really is the application.
Only if that tool's within the ordinance to allow us to look
Yeah,
at it.
Allow us to look at it.
I'm
We
okay
can
if
always allow,
Paul,
we can always take.
I'm gonna
that.
recognize Paul.
So it would just need to be a text amendment, so if you had someone with 3 or 2 or something, they said, hey, we'd like to do this, but the ordinance
It
doesn't
would
allow it,
require
then
a
they would,
text
they would come, they would apply for a text amendment. And then once they got that, but then it'd be applicable to the whole city, so
Yeah.
there wouldn't be a way for us to say, you can have it, but this other 2-acre one.
But we could talk about it at that time. We don't have to make that call tonight.
Can there be a conditional use or something that allows individual?
I wouldn't recommend it, I think, just
I
wanna
just
get
think
the
5's too
committee or not.
high.
I mean, after reviewing, the way we're proposing to change the ordinance where we review the concept plan up front, I mean, if you didn't have a standard, having the concept plan together with the legislative general plan change, then that would give you the leeway. You could see how many acres it is and say yes or no after seeing
Seeing the concept plan, which it would be appropriate. So
which our new process will require But that's if we were to remove the minimum
No
project
minimum.
size. If it says 5 acres is minimum, you know, it's gonna come to us and we're like, sorry, the ordinance says minimum 5 acres.
That's why I'd like to do it at 4.
And ultimately, the decision to make a general plan change or zoning change is always legislative. So if you see a development and you say that's awful, it's a little pocket, we don't like it, then you can just say no. There's no guarantee of the plan being approved just because the ordinance says
I'm
no
trying
more
to
than this.
put this to bed, I really am, but I worry.
So if we don't have a minimum, everybody has to come before us and ask for approval, and we can say,
yes or no.
we really don't like the
Everybody
idea of
has to come before us
anything.
anyway.
But if
Right.
but it gives everybody the same fairness of saying, you can come before us and ask, but yeah, I guess I have a
But-
problem with that. It's a little disingenuous to me to
Yeah.
say, we really have no intention of approving anything that's,
But the other
Oh.
side of that is, it's not just for development. Everyone with an acre lot can come to you and start asking
That's
for zone
right.
requests,
Yeah.
zone changes.
And that could bog
And then
us
you,
down
so
if
let's say
we
you,
did
you
it.
change the zone, and now you're stuck with PRD, and even though you have no intention of approving anything on it,
Yeah.
because you don't like anything that goes on an acre lot.
yeah.
It just depends on what you want to see. I envision this ordinance kind of like a filter, and you're familiar with the filter size, you know, how many microns or whatever.
Mhm.
So the more regulations we put in this filter, the fewer things you'll see come before you, and the fewer places that can qualify for this. And so
Go to 5.
if you guys only want
I'll
to
go to
see a few
4.5.
select few, then you can make lots of little small, you know.
All right,
very
we got
tight
3 that'll go to 4.5, and we're done with this.
In that case, between 4 and 5 is not gonna make a difference.
It does make a difference.
And
It
maybe
was.
to our compromise, but not to.
No, it does make a
There are a
difference.
few that are
Because
right
there
in the
are
middle
several
there.
properties that we've looked at in the city that are more than 4.5, and that's the question that's coming up, is what about those properties? So, we've got 3 votes for 4.5, we can be done with this ordinance.
And we've
Sounds
talked
good.
about the.
You okay with that, Corinne?
the
Unless somebody
mixed-use
wants to
stuff.
bring up something else.
Well, I just wanted to make sure who's all going for the 4.5.
Jordan, Dave, and Lisa. Doug's not.
I'm not.
And whether you do or not is,
We still
We
want
have
your
to-
opinion, Corinne.
Irrelevant.
Yeah. No, we would
Oh.
like it to be,
we'd like you to
we'd
go
like
with
everyone
us.
to,
Join team the 3 of us.
What, just, doesn't matter. 4.5's got 3 votes, then.
Okay.
Doesn't matter what I say.
did we just make it more problems than it's worth?
No.
Should we just go to 4?
No.
Either way, I'm fine with 4. We've agreed on 4.5. I say we go with that, and if we have if we get a text change, and we like, you know what, they're right. This needs to
Then a
change.
4 applies.
We can
Okay.
do that.
Is more work than that's more work for us than just striking it and letting everybody come before us.
I agree with that.
No,
I disagree.
I
'cause
totally
you-
disagree.
Everybody would come up with
anyone that
1
wants to
acre,
build a
2
townhome
acres,
on a
3
half-acre
acres.
lot, come
Right.
talk to me.
There's no way I'll let
No.
that.
I do like the filtering aspect of this.
No, wait, did Doug say that he didn't want anything on there?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm saying it's better to have something than nothing.
Yeah.
And 4.5 is something.
Okay,
See, and I'm still good with 4, but if it's 4.5 is the consensus, and then we move forward.
Okay. But what we don't know is attached units.
we,
Yeah, we do.
yeah, we did. We had 3 people say 6.
Yep, 6.
She was the 3rd vote.
Oh, okay.
So
Yep.
you and I disagree, but,
I didn't say anything, but I'll just go along with it.
all right.
Okay, we done?
I think
Yep,
we're
I
done.
think we're done.
Very good.
We can vote on this in the next meeting and be done with it.
Okay, I have 6, 9, 12. On the 12, you have to meet 3 out of the 4. And on the number 2, you have to be on an arterial as defined in the current,
Yeah.
master plan, not the proposed. And then we have 4.5 minimum acres, and 6 plexes are okay.
That was the
That-
compromise. Do
okay.
I love it? No, but I'm done.
The compromise is the name of the game when you have 30,000 people in a
I
city.
do not want to go another 2 months.
And
on
I
this.
have to say, I'd rather be on I don't agree with every piece, but I'd rather be on a council that compromises than be part of the discussion 3 years ago when we just went all the way down to 6 and there was no compromise.
Yeah.
Well,
Wait, that was more than 3 years
we've
ago.
all given in to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah,
I think each of us gave in a little.
yeah, I think so glad, I like. what
Do I
we've
love
come
it?
up
No,
with.
but
I think it's very workable, and I think it doesn't shut out developers and everything, but it also doesn't leave us up to.
Council, I'd like to know what your druthers would be. We have 6 and 7 on here that deal with mixed use, and with the R1 residential for discussing and maybe a little bit of a learning curve there. That's 20 minutes. Looking at the rest of the agenda, what's your druthers? Do you want?
I could put off mixed use till another meeting.
All right.
I could.
That's not a problem.
How about R1 cluster? Can we
I
put
would.
that?
I think we can do that in 5 minutes.
All right. I'll give you
'Cause
five. I'll give you 5 minutes.
All right. We on R1 cluster we talked about, and I thought we had consensus that we wanted to remove cluster from R1 and create a separate cluster or something, so that when we are getting cluster, we know what we're getting, and when we're getting R1, we know what we're getting, and there's no debating that somebody could have either or both.
So my only question is, does cluster, what does cluster give us? It's just open space.
What cluster does is it guarantees a certain part of open space. And I want the cluster ordinance to be more restrictive, to say that it's got to have a development agreement, it's got to have significant benefit to the green space, because if you look at Trailside, the green space we ended up with is fairly irrelevant. It's not very usable. So to me, that was a waste of giving somebody cluster.
So is this just another use in PRD at that point?
No, not at all. A cluster would be a guaranteed green space ordinance versus higher density. That is not in PRD.
Okay.
We do not, we say 20%, but it is flexible. It
Okay.
has to be contiguous for cluster to get that down, and that's the key. That's why it would be a different ordinance.
The question now with this is what is your definition of open space, and what is the requirement for that? That's the question.
I agree with you, Corinne, and that's why that would be defined in the cluster ordinance and not
Well,
separately.
But so really what we're doing today is we're voting to strike it, or we're not voting. We're recommending we strike it from R1 and create
And
a
make it its own
thing.
Yeah.
The big difference between the way it is now, it's a conditional use permit, which
means it can be decided outside of this body.
It'd be a major conditional use permit, which would mean it would go to planning commission.
Right.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with it going to planning commission, but I do have a problem with the conditional uses that have not come to us.
So conditional uses are essentially approved uses as long as they meet the conditions. And in a good ordinance, you'd have very specific things that they need to meet to be able to be approved. It's kind of like an administrative thing. As long as they meet that, the city should approve
There's
it.
no subjectivity.
Pulling
It's
it out
like
into a
automatic.
separate ordinance, that means that they have to apply for a zone change, and then that becomes a legislative decision, and you can say no for whatever reason.
Yeah, and see, that's kind of where we're going with this. Is the problem right now is someone apply for R1 and we don't really know what we're getting. It could be R1 cluster, it could be R1, and so we think on one hand, we're kind of thinking we're doing this, and then we're like, well, actually we're going to do the cluster over here, and don't worry, it'll be awesome.
Yeah, and it goes to planning commission, then you don't.
And that's been the issue, is really we don't have much control over it. And it actually has been used as a threat to say, well, he has R1, so he can do R1 cluster, and then you don't get this control element. I don't like that. So let's just divide them and make them separate.
Okay, so from my point of view, there's not a downside to this. From a planning point of view, is there a downside to splitting it out?
No problem with it.
I mean, with our general zone change that we have coming up, my hope is that we're all going to decide that the general plan will be just that, general.
Yes.
It's going to be, this will be residential, this will be commercial, this will be industrial. Maybe we'll have some, the PRs and RPs will be under one zoning, and all of the Rs will be under a different zone type. But in the end, the general plan will be general, and they won't have to do a general plan change and
they can apply for zone. I mean, they could apply for cluster, and that's
Paul,
fine.
did you have something you want to put in this?
I just think it's a lot cleaner of a process. What we have currently doesn't really have very good standards, and so it'd be hard to say no.
Yeah.
So this is it looks like a zone the way that it's written out. So it makes a lot more sense to have it as a separate zone.
Let's go.
I know.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Noah. The density is the same, right?
Yeah.
2.3. Yeah, so from your question on from a planning perspective, you know, the impact to the community is really, it's a slightly different housing unit usually, because you've got all the open space saved on one end and you have smaller lots.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that
But
up.
the number of units is the same. The number of people tends to be a little
Yeah.
lower with the smaller units, smaller lots.
Yeah.
So the cluster kind of has either the same or probably, like in a product like Trailside, has a less impact on the city. You have fewer residents that move in because the household size is
And I do
smaller.
like the Trailside green
Yeah.
space.
So council, where are we? Do you want to
Say
go after
split it
minutes?
out. Split it out.
Split them out.
Okay. You have some direction there,
Done.
Noah?
Yep, done.
Okay. Paul, open and public meetings. You still with us,
You have
Corinne?
to roll with some tax too.
Rolling some
Sounds like I'm on a plane.
I know, I keep checking for my seatbelt.
Every time I hear that, I think that is a familiar sound. What am I supposed to be doing? Is she my stewardess? But I mean, flight attendant. That's what I meant. Stewardess.
Oh my God.
Maybe for Lisa's benefit, Lisa, once a year we have to show that we went through open meetings training, and we get
Mayor?
yes.
Sorry. Okay, I don't know if the mic got moved or something. You just sound a little quiet. Don't move the camera.
Oh, you don't want to see the slides?
Corinne, I
I
was
have
just.
it on my packet. Put that back.
Oh, did you put it in the Dropbox?
I can add it to Dropbox.
Thanks for trying though.
Sorry, I was just messing with that computer because it had an error message that popped up, so it probably just made it go quiet for a second.
Can you really get parents
Got it,
done?
thanks.
Yep, so yeah, this is annually mandated. We are supposed to talk about ethics in open meetings. I will not take 30 minutes, so here we go. So the starting point with all open meetings trainings is a reminder that meetings of public bodies like this one are open to the public, unless there's an exception. So the question there is, what is a meeting, what is a public body, and then what exceptions apply, and when. We'll talk about that. First of all, public body includes the council, the planning commission, or a body created by ordinance or resolution or rule that is supported in whole or part by tax and has the authority to make decisions regarding public's business. So that includes, for instance, the Arts Council is created by ordinance, or the Parks Advisory Committee created by ordinance. That's why we follow the Open Meetings Act as far as noticing and minutes and things like that in those bodies. The meeting means that you have to be convened by someone who has authority to do that. So generally that would be, for this body, it's the mayor would need to convene you to talk about, or even just receive comments from the public about. It's something that you have jurisdiction over. So in the case of the 2050 meetings, the mayor has convened that. The council wanted to be present, and since you were receiving comments from the public during that meeting, we deemed it to be a meeting that was covered by the Open Meetings Act. Yeah, Jordan.
So on this, so let's say that the Arts Council was brought up. Let's say that the chair and the vice chair and the secretary for some reason don't make it, but they still have a quorum. Is there someone authorized to open that meeting at that point?
Yeah, as long as there's a quorum. I don't know. I have to look at their bylaws and see. But
We do have like a step down, and so that there's a quorum. Somebody's in that sequence that can.
Yeah,
run.
it probably usually falls to the most senior member as like a default. So yeah, as long as there's a quorum there, they can convene.
But you're saying Parks Committee is an open meeting? Does that mean it's recorded?
The Parks Advisory, I think that was created by
Yes.
ordinance. Yeah, it's
They're
recorded.
recording them.
Okay.
Because they can make, well, can they make decisions?
They vote on recommendations that they forward to you.
Making decisions doesn't mean that it's binding or final, but they're making decisions saying we're going to decide to recommend something.
The reason for the question is that requires them to do minutes.
We do minutes.
They do minutes.
We don't record, do we?
Yeah,
Where are
you
the minutes?
record.
Chris is recording them.
Yeah,
I'm the
Chris records it.
secretary, so I do the minutes.
So social gatherings don't count. So if you all enjoyed bowling and went over to bowl together, that'd be okay. But while you're bowling, don't say, "Oh, hey, by the way, while we're all here, let's talk about the PRD," because we didn't talk enough about it last night.
Over the last 4 months.
I think we just got a little poke there.
So notices of meetings, we do schedule annually the meetings. We try to anticipate holidays, things like that. We need to notice everything at least 24 hours before the meeting.
Things that aren't on the agenda are off limits, but if a citizen brings up something, you can talk about it, but you can't make you can't decide to do something about it. So there's a little leeway there because I think the state recognizes that citizens sometimes really want you to talk about things, but you definitely can't take final action on anything they bring up. We put that we post it here at City Hall and the Community Center. We publish it in the newspaper and on the Public Notice website. Agendas need to be specific enough that people know what we're going to talk about, but it doesn't need to be so specific that that it's a novel. So everything just needs to be listed on the agenda. And again, if it's not on the agenda, you can't take any final action on those. Some of the exceptions to the open meeting are closed meetings. So it's limited to the following discussions. You can talk about individuals. So if it's talking about character or professional competence of a person, then you can close the meeting for that. If there's any pending or even reasonably imminent litigation, so if a person is threatened to sue the city and you want to talk about what the city needs to do to address that, you can talk about it there. If you're going to be discussing the purchase, exchange, lease, or sale of real property, and if public discussion would either disclose values of property or prevent us from completing the transaction on good terms, then you can close the meeting to discuss those things.
So I never thought of this before, but most of the time a lot of the times when we're discussing the first one, individuals, we're also discussing their pay.
Right.
And we're okay doing that?
Yeah, so you're talking about their professional competence, and when you're discussing pay, it's, how competent are they? Are they at a point where we would be comfortable, offering that? So yeah, that's a good question. Also, if there's any sort of investigative proceedings or anything where you're talking about security systems, then we could go into closed meeting for that. We keep written minutes, or I should say Cassie keeps written minutes, and also recording of all of our meetings. All those things are included on the minutes. Officially, the record of the minutes, the minutes are the official record of the meeting. So the recording is interesting, but what's in the minutes is the official record. Now we do business by resolution and ordinance. So if the minutes don't match with what the ordinance or resolution said, then the minutes need to be corrected.
How does that work?
What?
Let's say that somebody catches a fact that there is what actually happened in the meeting was recorded incorrectly. How do we address that?
So if you've adopted the minutes, you can always go back and amend minutes.
Does it have to be done, or can it just be adjusted?
If it's like a clerical issue, then I would say it can just be adjusted. If it's like a substantial issue, then I would say you go back and the body would say this is what happened because we approved this ordinance. So electronic message transmissions. The state law does allow things like email to occur between members of the public body. There's a little bit of leeway given you there, but just be careful that you honor the spirit of the open meetings rules, which means that you're going to take your actions openly and you're going to deliberate openly. So if an email communication is not just saying, hey, here's an idea, let's talk about it later, but if it becomes a back and forth, that's something that should occur during a public meeting. One thing I wanted to mention, so for instance, we have the YouTube stream going, and I think there's a feature where people can comment on the YouTube video. I would recommend that you not review those during the meeting and take those into consideration, because we have times where the public are invited to comment, and so someone comes to the meeting and they're say, okay, you can comment now, and then they sit down and then they have to sit and wait. It's really not fair for those people. If people online can just sort of chime in whenever they feel like, and you're taking it into consideration.
That's a really good point, but as long as we're recording that, can you provide the comments that are made after the meeting?
Like during the YouTube? Or
yeah, if somebody made comments during the YouTube online, that's now an official transcript. So can that be provided to us after the meeting?
You mean, are you meaning, are those part of the minutes? Are they part of the meeting?
I think they're not part of the minutes.
They're not part of the
that's
meeting
up to
minutes
Cassie.
at
But
this point.
If they're being made, I'd love to review them after the meeting.
You can go look at them. Yeah,
you can go look at them.
Yeah. They stay on the
Just on
YouTube
forever
account. Yeah.
On the video, yeah, with each individual video.
Comment.
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah.
So that'd be similar to, maybe you've got.
There's usually not a whole lot. They really like the YouTube.
That'd be similar to if someone wrote a letter or an email to you after the fact and you read the email, that'd be fine. So
I guess the point is I'm here, so I'm not watching that, so I just like to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it stays there, so you can go back and
Now I have to go look it up.
Well, Yeah.
And I would encourage you to refrain from looking at text messages, especially about things that are happening. So definitely no communications between council members. But even if you have someone in the audience or someone who's at home that's texting you about it, it's just not fair. Especially if you've got an applicant and it's an administrative matter. That would be completely unfair and it'd be a due process problem because they are having information shared with the decision maker that they have no opportunity of reviewing and refuting. So that's something I would say shy away definitely from any sort of messaging or looking at online comments or things during a meeting. I know after the meeting, different story. You can always look at things after the meeting. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so talking about ethics. So there's this question of conflicts versus criminal activity, and I think if you've watched the news in the last few years, there are sometimes criminal charges brought against people for ethical lapses that either juries or prosecutors have decided, well, it was just conflict, but it wasn't criminal, so I'm not going to pursue it. But there is kind of a slippery slope that can occur there.
That's why we picked
I was trying to figure that out too.
It's
slippery slope.
Yeah. So when we talk about the difference in conflicts and criminal activity, there's sometimes a fine line, and you'll have members of the public who will say, this is criminal, this person should be locked up forever. The law is actually a little more flexible often in those cases. But just, I guess the most important thing is to be deliberate and think about whether you have a conflict. And if you do that, I think you're always going to be safe from the criminal side. If you're thinking to yourself, do I have a conflict? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And to be deliberate, I think you'll generally be in pretty good shape. Let me move on. There we right. There we go. Okay. Okay, so for one example, so using your official position to further your interests or the interests of another. So let's say that you go into local store and you say, hey, you're going to give me a discount because I'm on the council, and if you want to get whatever some consideration, then you're going to give me a discount. That would be inappropriate. Or if you were to use your position in your professional capacity and say, hey, if you guys give me some concessions, then I'm going to give you concessions when you arrive before the council. You also can't do it for others. So if a person, maybe your neighbor, says, hey, can you talk to the prosecutor because my son got a ticket and I want him to give him special treatment, can you maybe just tell him to dismiss it? That would be inappropriate. So don't do that. If you want to connect him to the prosecutor and say, hey, here's the person to talk to, that's fine. Or if you wanted to say, what's the usual deal you offer, that'd be okay. But if you're trying to get special treatment, that would be inappropriate. Sometimes we have access to private, controlled, or protected information. Those are terms of art in the code. Those are for grandma purposes. Those are things that are not given to the public. Those are not public records. So we get access to those things. So as employees, we get access to personal information all the time. Police officers will get people's social security numbers and their birth dates and all sorts of things. We'll get real estate documents that if they were to be released to the public can be detrimental to a landholder. Attorney work product, maybe we hire an attorney, or maybe I produce something that is for internal consumption. Use of this information is restricted. So if you get something and you know that these are restricted documents, do not share them with the public. Don't share them with your spouse. Don't send my memo over to a neighbor who's an attorney and say, hey, can you look at this and tell me what you think? If you want a second opinion, we can get a second opinion, but make sure that it's within the bounds of attorney-client communication and confidentiality. If you use it for another person or for yourself, especially, that's unlawful and can lead to criminal consequences. Gifts. So sometimes people will get gifts, and you'll get gifts from people that you know in the community. Maybe you've known them for 30 years, and they want to give you a gift because they've always given you a gift, and you wonder, well, are things changed because I'm a council member now? The question of whether a gift is appropriate or inappropriate is whether they would tend to influence a reasonable person's decision, and it's understood that the gift is a reward for official action. An economic benefit includes loans at below fair market values or compensation for services at rates above fair market value. There are exclusions because they want to make it really clear that certain things just are sort of below where they're concerned. So if it's an occasional non-pecuniary gift, and that means no money, so money, cash certificates, or cash, gift cards, If it's something other than that, so it could be a meal or something like that, if it's less than $50 and it's occasional, then that is excluded from that. Additionally, as you have political campaign that you run, people are allowed to contribute to your political campaign, and often if you push policies that they agree with, then you're going to find that they want to donate, right? So that's an exclusion also.
So if a developer wants to take 2 of us to lunch, and it's under $50, we're okay there, but are we okay with the top part? Because it could still be construed as trying to sway our decision.
Are you swayed by a lunch? Is the question. If you are, then you should probably not go.
Okay.
That's the question. So I mean, if it's to facilitate a business discussion and it's professional, then the Ethics Act does not stop you. If your own personal ethics thing says, I don't want to ever take a dime or a meal or a crumb from anyone, follow that. That's fine. You'll never get in trouble if that's your policy. But if you want to, if they say, hey, I want to take you to lunch and just talk to you about this, and it facilitates a discussion about the policy issue, it's okay under state law, as long as they don't say, hey, I bought you lunch, so you're going to approve my project, right? If that happens, then that's inappropriate.
Well,
Does that answer your question?
They brought it in here before.
You can always hold yourself to the standard of, to avoid any appearance of conflict or of inappropriate behavior, I'm going to just say no all the time. That's totally fine. You can do that. Business transactions. So if a member of this public body wants to help someone engage in a business transaction with the city, you can actually do it under the state code. But you need to provide a sworn written disclosure to the mayor. And also, before you decide anything on that transaction on this body, you need to tell the body, hey, just so you know, I'm going to be personally benefiting financially from this transaction. That would be a public document, the written disclosure. And it also needs to be provided at least 10 days prior to either the transaction or when you get paid for the transaction. The most common would be like if you were a realtor or something like that and the city was buying property and you were a realtor. Obviously, you can recuse yourself if you wanted to from that decision, but state law would actually allow you to participate in it if you wanted to. Consequences for violating the things we've just talked about. There are sanctions such as removal from office that would need to go through a district court action. A criminal investigation could also go there. What we generally do is we would give that to the county to investigate, so there wouldn't be a conflict of a city agency considering it. Additionally, if there was any contract that was entered into in violation of those things, then we can void it without providing anything. So even if we'd received something from the vendor or whomever, we can just void it, and we can even keep the consideration, sounds like. Okay, so additional conflicts of interest that we just need to make sure you disclose to the city. So if you have an interest in businesses regulated by the city, and that would include any business that has a location within the city, then you would need to disclose that relationship to the mayor. And a substantial interest.
How does that apply to home office?
If you have a home occupancy, yeah, it's definitely regulated by the city. Yeah, regulated by the city. So yeah, you'd want to disclose that. If either you or if your spouse or any of your minor children have at least a 10% interest in that business.
Interesting.
And you keep it updated. So if it changes, make sure you keep that updated. And we were talking about business transactions. That would need to be disclosed, as you mentioned. And then if you have any investment interests, so maybe you're not an owner, but you have an investment, some sort of investment in a particular business or property or something like that, then you would want to disclose that before any sort of discussion on it. So upon your election or upon your appointment, you would disclose these conflicts. If the nature of it changes, then you just update the conflict of interest statement. We have some forms that you can just fill out. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to write it yourself. We have some forms you can use. To stay on the safe side, if you just over-disclose, that's always a good thing. So if you disclose at the beginning and in the middle and at the end, and you're just always reminding people of these conflicts, that's the best route to go. These are minimum standards, so you can even participate, even if you have a conflict, you can participate in the decision if you want to. Generally, I think people recuse though when they or abstain when they feel that conflict of interest. If you feel like there's been a violation of this, then there are proper channels to follow. and it'd be important to not make some sort of a public accusation against someone in a meeting, generally because that's not a forum where you can investigate. It's not a forum where a person is even able to defend themselves appropriately. So the proper channels would be reporting it to the mayor. If you feel like the mayor is involved or something like that, there's another route that we can talk about in the next slide. If you have a question of whether there's an ethics or a conflict of interest question, you can talk to me. Say, hey, here's the situation. We look at everything, and if you give me all the facts, I can give you an opinion as to whether there's a conflict that you need to disclose. I'll advise you on, whether I'll usually talk to you through sort of the practical realities of if you decide to stay on this decision, here's how it's going to look. If you have an allegation against another elected official, though, I'm going to stay out of it because I need to be the attorney that you don't feel is hostile toward you, right? That I'm not your adversary. So if that happens, then I would investigate those issues. Those we would refer to the Political Subdivisions Ethics Review Commission, which is created a few years ago. It's run by the state. It's independent. It has subpoena powers. So it's got all the abilities to conduct an investigation and present a finding. Those go through the Lieutenant Governor's office. So if you ever feel the need to go that route, we can look into that. I think this is the last slide. Part of this training is also just going over the role of elected officials. Again, so you've got the city council and you've got the mayor. The city council's one of their main roles is to establish policies, rules, ordinances, and regulations. The mayor is to implement those policies, enforce rules, ordinances, and regulations. The city council allocates city funds and sets the tax rate, and the mayor spends those city funds in accordance with the allocations and the policies that were set. The council gives advice and consent for the appointment of city officers. The mayor appoints and also gives direction to city officers and employees. The city council represents the people, but in your legislative capacity. The mayor also represents the people and was elected by the people in his executive capacity. It's always important, I think, to recognize these differences. Obviously, there's sometimes some overlap between the two because the mayor's here in the council meeting, and I think Mayor Gailey, he tries to keep his opinion generally out of the major policy discussions. It's just important to respect each other's roles. The mayor wasn't elected to be a voting council member. The council members weren't elected to be the mayor. You have your separate roles. All right. Any questions or discussions on those issues?
Just so people are clear on the investments thing, if you own stock in Walmart or Berkshire Hathaway, right? You can still make land use decisions that might impact those businesses.
Yeah, I mean,
As an example.
Yes,
it's a 10% stakeholder.
Well, that was in a business
that's
dealing with the
business that's being regulated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that type of, it would need to rise to the level where that conflict is going to arise. So yeah, Walmart's stocks aren't going to rise or fall based on land use decisions in one city. So yeah, good question. If you were really worried about it, just disclose it. But I don't think you
in
need
my
to.
401k, I have.
Request for a 5-minute recess.
Granted.
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Okay, that's at 9:12.
Gotcha.
I need to check.
So less than 30 minutes.
It was.
Buzz through that.
Is it up?
How long did it take?
18 minutes.
18.
Was that a new record?
I did a fast room planning commission because they didn't ask any questions. They just sit there.
Mr. Mayor, are we in recess?
For 5
Yeah,
minutes.
we're 5 minutes.
9:12 we reconvene.
Mayor, where will we be at on the agenda when we come back?
We'll be coming back with item J.
On J? Okay.
And
Thank you.
and let me tell you what we're going to do. We are going to limit. I know that you're closing in on you're over 11 there.
Yeah.
What we're going
That's
to
okay.
what we're going to do is we're going to be finished by 10 by hell or high water. We will limit the deep dive into CED. We need to have a special meeting. We've got minutes to approve, and we've got one action that we have to act on tonight. But we will be done by 10. I want you in bed by midnight.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
If you wanted to hurry and convene that business meeting so Robert can know, I think that's the only reason he's hanging around.
Why don't we do that before we go into the deep dive?
Yeah. That'll probably be
And we
good.
don't have any public.
Well, they're just all out in the hall chatting.
Like, let's leave them out there and we'll announce it.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't gonna be, but
Keep us out of home.
yeah. I don't have anything to go up to. No, I'm just kidding. No, I didn't realize they were doing the deep dive tonight, so I wanted to, for me it's educational. It's not for the fact that I really want to stay. I'd rather go home since I've been here since 7:30 this morning. So, but it's educational for me to learn the process because I'm sure I've got a deep dive coming up here soon. I don't know when, but I'm sure it's gonna be yours.
Yeah,
You
yours
were one of the
hasn't
first
done
ones.
that long ago.
You maybe have another year or so.
Only happens every 4.
Every 4th year? Yeah. There you go.
I don't know whether Eric was here then. Was Eric?
Yeah, he was there.
Was he there?
Yeah, because it happened. Been here since November 17, so.
In fact, I think he was one of the first
I
ones.
think it may have been the first one. It was either that or PD.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
She's going to California, Roseville.
Oh,
Lillian is.
That's where Buffy's daughter is.
Really? Maybe they'll be companions.
Is
She's
she-
serving there?
Yeah, Spanish speaking.
I wonder, let me find, I don't know what.
Is
it
she
said on
Spanish
that.
speaking?
Who is it?
No, my niece.
Oh, that's where Ashton is.
Well, how fun. Ashton? You have an Ashton too?
Yeah.
I did not know that we shared a
That's
name.
where Buffy's oldest is. She's in Roseville.
How
California.
fun. Okay, let's see. I'll check.
Aaron, do you want to go out there in the hall and call them all back?
Yep.
Would you?
I will gladly do that.
Thank you. I was wandering the hallways, wondering what to do next.
Oh my heck, it's my daughter-in-law's hometown.
What are we talking about?
My niece just got her mission call tonight. So it's in Roseville, California. I'm trying to watch it and see if it says what she'll speak, but it doesn't say. I'll do it tonight when I get home.
Speaking. Yeah, there's really only 2 options for California. I guess there could be more.
Corinne, are you with us?
Oh, that's
Night is young, my friend.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. We've got the council. We've got the council back. Let's go ahead and come out of recess. We have an agenda item involving the Davis County Clerk and Auditor's Office for election. Is that you, Cassie?
Yeah. We just are working with Davis County to start planning the 2019 municipal election, which obviously won't be until late this fall, but they start working on it pretty early. The declaration period is the first week of June, but we start working on some legal noticing in advance of that period. And so the county likes to have the contracts executed as early as possible. They've asked for March this year. So anyway, I just presented just kind of a summary of the duties that the county handles and then what the city is responsible for, and I also provided the agreement in your packet. So if you have any questions.
I wish there was any choice, but there's not. So
Wish there's a choice of whether or not to do it through mail.
Do you want to have an election?
what
are you questioning?
Not that. I wish that there was. I wish we had more say in the matter, like we could actually decide whether by mail was appropriate. But there is no logical other means than to do what we're doing. So.
Yeah. So I think this is a common consent item.
Yeah.
Okay. You good with that, Corinne?
Yes, sir.
Okay, council, I'm going to recommend that we go into a special meeting that has been agendized to approve some minutes and to authorize the administration to award a contract this evening. Is there any objection to going into that business meeting now? Any objections? Hearing or seeing none, I'll call us to order there. The first item on that agenda is the approval of minutes, work session January 8th, 2019, and the regular meeting of February 12th, 2019. Any discussion?
I'll move that we grant approval to those minutes.
I have a motion from Councilman Peterson. A second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That appears unanimous. Thank you. And Robert, you're up.
Thank you, guys. Wow. What a treat.
Tell me we don't love you.
Sorry, I have a question. So on the
yeah, go ahead.
on the 2000, where we're what is, are we going to be tearing up 2000 to do this?
Not the total road, no. We're just doing water laterals. We're taking it off of the old 8-inch line on that's on the west side of 2000, and we're tying them over to the 10-inch on the east side. The 10-inch is larger.
So it's already there.
And it's already there. And
so this is just going to be a couple holes.
It's newer, so it's in better. The pipe's in better shape.
So it's just going to be a couple holes.
It's just little trench patches for each house that's on the west side of the street to connect to these. That's it.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because if it was going to be major construction, I was going to look at, I know one of the things we brought up is the crosswalk. If we're going to be tearing apart 2000, I was going to say maybe we should try and do that in conjunction with this, but if it's not, if it's just trenches, then I'm okay with it as is.
I am planning on fixing the ramps right at that intersection, kind of in preparation for something maybe in the future.
Okay, that would be, yeah, whatever we can do to save money later on.
We're doing ramps with this project anyway, so we'll do ramps at that intersection on all four corners.
Jordan, for your information, we placed this on a work session for discussion, your crosswalk.
Fantastic.
It's coming.
I don't want to say it's not my crosswalk. For the record,
it is. It's called the Jordan Crossing.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that name is already taken by. It's probably copyrighted somewhere.
Jordan Crossing too.
The Savage. No, I'm just kidding.
Savage Crossing.
No,
this is.
Okay, so are there? I can summarize this unless.
I read the packet. Did you guys have any specific questions? I think it makes sense to try and group as much as we can and get the goodness out of that.
Corinne?
No questions, I'm good.
Okay.
Although, I do want assurances that this is going to fix the whole Rock Creek Park thing.
Yes.
The drainage.
Yeah, it's.
We think this is a final solution.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just have one concern. And that is, are we taking every precaution to write into the contract that damage to neighboring roads done by construction is also taken care of? Because right now, Grayson Acres or Estates or whatever that's called has almost made Doral Drive South unpassable at this point.
So. Contractors, there is, I don't have it in front of me right now, but there is in the contract that contractors are required to repair any damage done beyond what's outside, what's the project includes.
So you're saying we might need to exercise this and that? contract down there?
Well, because when they did the Grayson
It's actually outside of
subdivision-
this discussion, is that?
No, it would be in the general conditions of the contract.
Anyway, when they
So-
did the one on, and then the Ranchettes West, where they come together, was a clean road, and now it is almost impassable. And they're tearing it up again. So,
Yeah.
so I'm saying that in the future we need to make sure that that doesn't happen. That we take a nice road, let them dump all their gravel and stuff on it, and scoop it up and tear up the road, and then walk away from it and say, well, that we weren't obligated to fix that portion.
So you're saying we need to have a provision against that?
We do.
Okay.
Right.
So that the contract, so that it's bared by the person who's doing the work, not by the city.
Did you just say bear?
Born.
Okay. Just.
When we do
Just
final
harass.
walkthrough, we'll watch for things like that before we make final payments and make sure they fix any damages that they caused.
Okay. So apparently we have something that we'll look at later on.
It's in the general conditions of the contract.
It appears that we're unified on that. I call
Yep.
the question.
Yeah, I thought we had a lot of good bids, and it looks like we did our due diligence, and I
There's
thought
some
it made
big
sense.
differences there. in
Make
the
a
first
motion that we-
ones.
There was one bid that's really way out there,
Yeah,
but the other 5 were actually pretty.
Yeah, they were
Close
within a
within
few-
dollars, yeah, which is
So-
why the last
so
one I
they're
went,
really
they're out
good
of, they're
bids.
wrong, yeah.
Really good bids.
So I'm gonna make a motion that we go ahead and approve, authorize the
Corinne wants
award
to
of
say something.
Oh,
contract.
it's okay. It's okay. He was taking care of it. We're good.
Okay.
Sorry.
You can second it.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That appears to be unanimous.
Nice job, Robert.
Cassie.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. It's been a good project.
We won't be adjourning. We're gonna return to the work session.
It's bad.
All right.
Still need to adjourn.
We need to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Bye.
Okay. We're adjourned. Let's move back into work session.
Where are we going now?
Pretty soon I'll get my
We're
training
on
wheels
K.
on. Okay.
Wait, okay. Just kidding.
Okay. Okay.
Council, where Corinne is, it's approaching midnight. So at 10, we are going to table where we are and continue on.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay,
Be quick, Noah.
who's ready to deep dive?
Apparently you're not. Let's go, buddy.
All right. Okay, this is the biannual review. It is my honor to present to you a glimpse into my life and to my world. To summarize, there are basically 5 major things that we do in the CED department. Number 1 is business licensing. Number 2, code enforcement. Number 3, planning. Number 4, building permits. Number 5, economic development, community and economic development. So first point is business licensing. This is primarily done by Heather Davies, and our new hire Julio Passes is in training. So this includes home occupations, brick and mortar seasonal fireworks, alcohol licensing, solicitor permits, and also working with local businesses for awards. Here are the statistics for generally there's a trend of increasing number of business licensing. The blue bar is the total businesses. The orange is the home-based business. If you notice, that's a lot of home-based businesses. 461.
So is that 2019 to date?
To date, yeah.
Okay, so we would expect that to be.
Well, but
we'll keep
everybody
growing.
usually licenses at the beginning of each year, so.
We're grateful for those home businesses. They're awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you'll see here. Generally, there's about 15 new businesses per month, or actually closer to 12 or 13.
Well, that's the weird thing up above.
Sorry.
2018 to 2019, it looks like there's didn't really change.
Yeah.
There's 11, so we lost as many as we gained.
No, that means there's no new ones, but everybody
Yeah.
relicensed.
This is at this point in 2019. I suspect that number will go up by the end.
Just that scared me.
So there are
when I saw
renewals
that.
and then there are new businesses, and we keep track of both.
So you can see this is what last year looked like, the trends. January, you have a lot of people getting after it and, you know, renewing or deciding what to do with their business. July, you have a lot of solicitor permits, things like that. August, I guess it's the dog days of summer. But you can see generally, you know, there's 12 or 13 applications per month. Code enforcement. Ken Sessions. He is a productive fellow. He's a former police officer. He's actually from Syracuse. And he, you know, if you park your car and it's blocking the sidewalk, you may hear from him. Or if you have a trailer in the street. So he's very productive in enforcing our ordinance. This 2018, he had 671 reports. So that there's also follow-ups and things that in there that's not actually included, but he's also helping us with our building inspections. Community development. So this includes Royce Davies, the planner, Heather Davies, and me, of course. We have subdivisions, general plan, zoning, you know, all kinds of stuff. GIS mapping, planning commission, you know, all those things. And some of these things are behind the scenes things that you don't necessarily see. You know, like when somebody builds a garage, it has to be reviewed by our department, make sure it meets the setbacks. Here's a summary of the last 2 years of the items that the Planning Commission acted on, just kind of reflection of what we're working on. It's been steady as far as total number of items, 50 to 51. And you can notice the blue text amendments. We've been amending our ordinances a lot. It's taking up almost a quarter of our time there. And number 2, site plans, final plats, subdivisions. So you can see if you combine the final plat, preliminary plat, plat amendment, minor subdivision, that also you know, aggregated makes up a big portion of our time doing residential subdivisions. This is a list of our projects that we're managing. So once it comes through city council, it's not the end. They eventually go through to build the subdivision, which involves, you know, building roads and our department works very closely with Public Works in making sure that they have all of the right documents and that they're bonded correctly, and that should something really bad happen, that the city isn't left with a muddy mess. I'm not going to go through all of these items on the list, and some of these items are even things that haven't even been applied for, but they're items where I get a lot of phone calls and people are following up, and it does take our resources and time. You know, and some of these are projects that have been approved 2 or 3 years ago, but they're not built out yet, and there's still inquiries and you know, things as they're getting their building permits. And building permits is really kind of an indication of the overall growth, and it's a statistic that's tracked by the census. It's an indicator of how fast a community is growing, and you can you can pretty accurately estimate population growth off of it, based off of the number of people per household and the number of new building permits for single family or for dwelling units, and kind of extrapolate growth trends that way. So the building department consists of Brenda Leota, Kim Dab, Ken Sessions, Brian Lemons, and Julio Paz. You notice that some of these names show up in multiple parts of our department, as we're cross-trained in a lot of things. So you see the building permits, it's more than just homes. It's also if somebody's building a deck or finishing out a basement or doing some remodeling, anything with plumbing or electrical. You know, they're really making sure that our residents are safe and that things are built up to code. And there's been multiple cases where our guys have caught things in plan review that could have been, you know, very life-threatening, where you know, they're missing framing or you know, electrical things that they could have caught the house on fire. So they're really there to keep us safe. So if you look at the numbers, 2018 we had 365 homes, and it's not, I mean, it is one permit, but each permit there's multiple inspections. So, you know, they're out inspecting the footing and foundation, and they're inspecting you know, the sheathing, and so they're going back multiple times, and sometimes there's even re-inspections. So if you look at it, it's generally about 28 inspections per day. We have 3 inspectors, so they're busy, and they do an awesome job, and we're proud of them. And then the other thing about our department is that we are generating revenue for the city. The new building permits, this is actually of the actual buildings is 76 million, which gets property tax. But we also on average, a single family home, just in the permits, because the impact fees get evaluated with those permits, they're generally in the neighborhood of $20,000 per home in fees. Did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Just stretching. Sorry. We have 308 lots currently recorded that are ready to go. So that's an indication that it's, you know, we have about a year's supply of inventory of homes that could be built. And look at this trend line. This is pretty impressive. You can see the Great Recession back in 2010, it really slowed down. And now we're 365 permits in 2018. That is higher than every other city in the county by far. We are very busy. And you can see it's been steady. You know, look at 2016, that's an impressive number as well. And we, you know, with the inventory that we have, and then with the projects that we have in the pipeline, with Shoreline and, you know, some of these other things, we're going to have inventory for a while. So we project that to be very busy. And then the fifth point is economic development. We're working hard for business recruitment, responding to RFIs. And I'm new at this. This has been since September, and I'm continuing to learn new things, and we're working hard to obviously we've been talking about some RDA incentives. This is the CD vision statement. So I want to make sure that we are following the direction that we've been given, and this is from the strategic plan that we've recently visited. Number 1, Syracuse City has a clear and strategic plan for the community and economic development needs of the city. So we want to, number 1, you guys have been talking about an economic development plan. We want to commission that or work on that in the next year. We're currently working on the Vision 2050 workshops. We have 3 more workshops, and then from there we'll adopt the new general plan and update land use ordinances. That will be ongoing, and as a goal, I think we could keep working to make sure that we're meeting those needs that we're after. And then this is a little bit further out, but we've talked about conducting a financial analysis, and what that would be is evaluating the fees that our department's bringing in compared to the financial sustainability of the city and our revenue sources. And basically, we don't want, you know, before the Great Recession, the city got into trouble a little bit with, as those fees dried up and development slowed down, we had bonded for certain things, and it got into trouble a little bit as far as paying those bonds once things dried up. So we want to keep evaluating that, like you guys have been saying, making sure that all of our eggs aren't in one basket. The Community and Economic Development Department employees are knowledgeable and positive. So there's certifications for our business licensing tech, there's certifications for our building permit techs, there's certifications for our building official, for the inspectors, and also for the planners. I'm AICP, American Institute of Certified Planners. That's you know, something that I put behind my name. And we are a relatively small team compared to some of the other departments, so we want to make sure that we build that culture and that trust and that positive work environment. So that's ongoing. That helps reflect in our ability to provide good customer service. And number 3, the Community Economic Development Department communicates well with the business community. One thing we've talked about with the mayor is providing some visits to some local businesses and make sure that they know who our team is and that we understand the business's needs, and that venue of communication's open. We participate with the chamber, and that's ongoing. The farmers market is a unique beast in and of itself, where it's an event, but it's in our department because it's essentially what we call incubation tool. You know, for example, Float On actually started at the farmers market. I don't know if you guys knew that. And you know, I don't know if this one, maybe it might not be a great example because they went out of business, but remember the Brazilian bakery over by the karate place? Those guys started at the farmers market, so it's kind of a venue for people to try some things out. I know that you know, Brody's kids have sold rocks with eyeballs stuck to them. You know, so
made good money too.
Yeah,
I
and
used
bubble
to make
wands.
those.
You know, so it's just a venue.
Buddy rocks.
That
That's what they're called.
yeah, and some of it is quantifiable, but there's also an element of community development which isn't necessarily always quantifiable. It's building community and those relationships and the community goodwill, and that translates. You know, it's definitely quantifiable, but maybe not as easily as some of these other components of it.
So where are we going to continue to do that? Just out of curiosity.
Plan is to continue it by the museum parking lot, and we're hoping that with
who owns that parking lot?
City
I do.
does. And that we're hoping with the splash pad, you know, those vendors there will really capitalize on that.
My only concern with the farmers market is that our most expensive person in your department has been over that. That seems like a not very efficient use of manpower.
I agree, 100%. We have a market manager, and Dennis was our manager last year, Barrera, and he did a really good job. But yeah, I've been working on ways to, especially now that I'm director. Last summer I was not director, so this summer I won't have time to manage it the way
you have to divest yourself of some of the simple things.
I agree, 100%. And then the next point is technology improvements. We've been working on making things more available on our website, and with our new rollout of our website to have the ability to do, you know, renewals and applications and things electronically. So I tried keeping it concise and short as possible, but I do want to hear your input and listen to what suggestions and things you have for our department, so we can keep getting better.
So I have one thing that I'd like to bring up, and we've kind of talked briefly about this, is I agree with Dave. We really do need to, wherever we can, have you divest yourselves of some of these smaller things. 'Cause I think right now we have a huge opportunity with the coming of the West Davis corridor, and you know we hear that some of our businesses on the north side are struggling when we feel like that is prime real estate. What can we do to try and be it incentivize? I know one of the things that as we went to Vision 2050, we saw a few businesses that have a huge opportunity, and we really feel like they're a good fit for our community. We'd really like to have someone, you know, put together something and aggressively go after some of these businesses that would fit over there perfectly, and we need to convince them of that. what can we do to help you to be able to go after those opportunities?
Along those lines, we noticed at the Vision 2050 that there was one business that stood out so far, like 10 times what every other one did. And I believe that's also a domino for other businesses. If
Absolutely.
there is a business that is that dominant of an impact on your market, I would be all for being extremely aggressive with incentives to see if we couldn't land something like that. I get it that it would be hard to say one fast food over another when the impact in your city is less than the salary of an intern. But when something is so dominant like that, how can we not make an aggressive effort?
Absolutely. Since last Wednesday, I've reached out to Costco. It's a big.
We weren't naming them.
Oh, excuse me. I've reached out to that particular business. Have not got a phone call back yet, but in the past we've researched it.
And it could take months.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board. I'm willing to send him my shirt, send him a message. You know, I understand. We really want that, and I'll do everything I can to track make sure I'm soliciting those businesses, make sure they understand that we're interested.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you have the time to go after those? Or is there something, because I know we've talked about, you guys are a very small staff. I'm almost okay with maybe moving some things to something else if we need to. This isn't what I'm recommending, but maybe we move all of the what do you call it, ordinance code enforcement under admin, for example, or something like that.
Business licensing, in some cities it's in a different department, and even in some cities building permits is a different department.
We're hoping with the advent of the internet, or the advent of the internet, of our website. No, I didn't. But with the advent of the website, we're hoping some of that will be lessened.
Yeah, we want to make it be more
efficient. We do want to be technologically efficient, and I know we've also talked about the reviewing boards that the fire department has advocated, and I think those are good things that if those will help us be more efficient, I think those are good utilizations of dollars to try and keep you guys working on what we want you working on.
I am a little concerned that maybe there's not enough focus in CED. Maybe it's too broad, because there are certain things that have got to get done that seem to be I can put that one off because this one has to be done, and I don't think that we want to let some of that go. I think maybe we need to look for some of the other things that can be shifted.
Yeah, I know some cities, they have a current planner and the incoming calls and things, and they have a long range planner. Some cities have transportation planners, and they specialize in different things.
So I don't think we're there yet, no.
But I do think we have a huge opportunity in the next 4 years that won't come again.
Sure, I agree. And I agree, and I don't know if the bags under my eyes are indication of that I am running around like crazy.
We don't doubt that.
Crazy.
No, I'm starting to think maybe not enough.
It's in more bags. Just kidding. So yeah, I'm willing to explore all of those options. I know that my time is short and divided among those different categories that we've been talking about. So
So I think
I have a focus on the economic development, but
maybe in a
if other
future
things were lessened, I would have more time for that.
It doesn't have to be today, but maybe look at some of the things that maybe have nothing to do with anything else. That really no other part of what you do deals with this, and let's ask ourselves if there isn't a way to maybe push those somewhere else.
Okay.
Because and I'm looking at this not as a personal thing. I mean, the long-term history of the city is we've been through a lot of CED directors, and they always get over focused on residential development, and that takes up so much time that the economic development seems to lack. And so that's where I'm going with that.
Like
if
you
there are
showed us
things
that
that have
list.
nothing to do with,
You showed us the list of all of the plats that I don't feel like, as the director, you should even be looking at half of those plats. I'm hoping we can offload that from you.
And I'm
but
wondering
I
if-
feel like, as your planner, we need your input on that. So that's kind of where I'm torn in that aspect.
but like business licensing, does that have anything to do with, other than, sure, it's economic, but it almost feels like an administrative function. At the same people at the desk do other administrative functions that are like that.
In other cities it isn't.
I mean, maybe that would help, not just make it one less divided focus.
Yeah, there's a shift. We have our planning tech / business license person, you know, so if that load was lightened,
Yeah.
the planner, Royce could put some stuff on to her, and then I could put some stuff on to him.
That's
If
the
that's-
kind of thing I'm talking about.
Let's look at those types of things that will help you be more efficient and make sure we don't miss these opportunities.
Sure. Appreciate
Are
it.
there training and certifications associated with being an economic developer? Because you talked about you have the AICP. Is there
Sure.
something like that that you're missing out on that you'd like to get for economics?
We're willing to invest in you if that's what it takes.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I mean,
there's classes and there's courses, and then there's also
Well, to a point,
certifications. Yeah.
I'm not ready to send you back to school and add 40 hours to your work week. That's a little too much.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely career focuses. Like we know Brigham, that was his emphasis and his background. You know, where he didn't have the planning or the design, but he had more of a career focus on there. So yeah, I don't necessarily want to go back to school to get a degree in, you know, economic development, but yeah, there are courses and things.
Career development type
yeah,
things.
I'm happy to do that, and I recognize that I don't know everything about economic development.
Corinne, are you trying to break in?
No, I was just considering the fact that, or the question of asking, is there at any point where you feel like you need to actually go make a site visit to some of these businesses? I've heard of that being done by other cities trying to catch big fish. I don't know if that's necessarily always a good plan, just curious about the question itself.
People in our region have done that, sent groups even, maybe, 2 or 3 people from the city to go in and make a presentation. And I think that ought to be, I don't know if that's necessary, but it's certainly all options ought to be considered.
Yeah, and I think those are more successful if you do have 1 or 2 landowners lined up that are on board with what you're pitching.
Got it.
And or a developer,
Yeah.
that or even a realtor that works with that entity.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
you need to build some connections first, is what you're saying.
if our goal is, there's things that we can do to be shovel ready that we haven't done, and if that economic development is a major focus, and we know there's a few sites where we really want to be structured to incentivize, say, the one that we're talking about, I can think of one particular place that is probably our best shot if we were to get it, and there's multiple steps away. Should they show interest today, we don't have tax increment financing available. We don't have
We don't on that property?
No.
I thought that was in the zone.
Nope.
Okay, so we need to be taking those steps then.
Yeah.
Let's just say that now.
Yeah, if that's where we really want to go, we could set up the CDA there. We could work on the zoning so that it's right, and we can really be aggressively pursuing them.
I'd like to take a shot.
Yeah. Okay.
And if we miss, I'd like to take another shot.
Yeah, I'll just camp out at their corporate offices.
Well, I mean,
no, seriously, we need to do some due diligence and not be afraid.
I don't think they're the only one that could get us that type of response. I think there's a few different types that we ought to prime that area for something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's set up a list of targets and let's take those shots and see where we get.
And I think that's exactly it, what Jordan said. Let's meet sometime when we're not announcing our intentions to the world, but let's set up a couple of targets, because there's information out there that can help us understand the real impact of certain ones, and we know certain gaps in the availability in our own area. This is part of what we go back, and I just realized we missed item G, but part of what we need to do is set up, okay, we've got some targets that can be a big impact on our city, and this is where the emphasis ought to be, not whoever walks in with the next burger shop or whatever. You know, that's fine, we'll help them, but we're not soliciting them, because that's not the impact.
Apparently, unless it's the other one that everybody wants.
We already have that.
The other C word?
The other C word.
Yeah, that one's not going to be.
I'm 100% on board with that, and there's a lot of groundwork, and with the visioning stuff, we're really laying the groundwork to have it's really a framework, and the branding and the visioning and the general planning, those things can set us up so that that's completely shovel ready.
So I'm for that, but as we only have 10 minutes left, could we shift to item G that we missed?
Sure.
Anything else you want to do on CD? I think you're doing a good job. I just want to make sure we really go after these opportunities.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
You were doing branding? You doing branding, or is?
Yeah. Well,
We'll see how far we get in.
Effort.
In 10 minutes. Well, it was
8
only
minutes.
scheduled for 10 minutes, so.
Really, I don't have a big presentation or anything. All I did was send you guys an article to think about.
And thank you for that, because I thought that was spot on about some of the things that we ought to be considering. And so let me start the discussion there with the first stage of that, and that's where I'm most concerned. We have had repeated attempts to hire outside sources to tell us what to do with different things or tell us who we are, and we almost consistently get somebody who doesn't know. And all they do is they read a website or something and come back and try to tell us who Syracuse is. I'm not sure that we couldn't get help with this, but I think that we need to start with us. It may not be something that concludes with us alone, but we really need to be the starting point, because only people here know what Syracuse is. I think our Visioning 2050 has given us some information that is probably more accurate than anybody that's going to go out and survey random people and tell us what Syracuse is. So I think we ought to utilize that and move forward. But I think what we were going for when we first brought up branding is some of the things that we've been talking about here that are the little things that can start putting us in a position for us to do more. Like, what are some of the consistent themes that we can do? In this article it's stated, and we just talked about it, what are the targets that we could actually get? What's achievable for us? We know that it's not going to be, like, for example, getting a new Smith Center isn't going to work because it's right outside our doorstep. So that's not a target. But what is? And why can we make it a target? And
yeah, it's more than just a logo.
Yeah.
It
or
is.
Like graphic designs.
Like, I was thinking along the lines of, as we're going through, our logo now is,
Phragmite, which is
it's a cattail. Come on.
Okay.
There's a difference.
I love our logo.
I don't hate our logo, but I do wonder what it says about our city. And I'm not saying that we need to leave. I'm just saying that we need to find a way to go beyond the logo, because the logo's not telling the story we want to tell.
Well, no, it ties back to what we're already talking about. A big part of the branding is the economic development. When you think of the places that you call Restaurant Row, or Outdoor City Ogden, or it's those businesses that can help brand you.
Like, I was thinking, I would almost like to target, you know, like a bike shop that can be somewhere we could try and push them kind of out by Antelope Island.
I brought that up a couple of months into my first term to Brigham, and he actually approached 3 different bike shops. They were none of them had an interest. However, doesn't mean it's dead forever.
Well, that's before there was a freeway.
Right. So, I mean, we don't give up. I'm just saying that we did try, and so the question is, let's say we did get a bike shop. Is that really define us? It doesn't.
That's the thing.
It's
we
a
have
small
to pick.
piece.
Yeah.
We have to. I'm saying we need to look at some of the things that really can be a bigger piece of that, bigger bite that will cause other dominoes to fall.
But the things that we have now is, I'd say we have a pretty extensive trail system.
Yeah.
We have. We're trying to get a good ratio of parks. I think our parks plan will help us develop that aspect of it. So if we want to say Syracuse, the land of open space, I'm not saying that's what it is, but that means we need to invest in that. We need to make sure our trails are very nice.
The challenge is money.
Yeah,
and so is that really something we can afford to attack? I want to, but can we put all our money there? And that's where Cresta says yes. But that's where, if we put our money in something we could tackle and is more within our control, and I'm not saying we don't do this other, I'm just saying that we need to look at the dominoes that we can start the motion going, and then let that help the later dominoes of the money that we're going to need to do some of this stuff. One of the, we need to understand who our competitors are and what we're up against.
But as far as what I think this was supposed to kind of broach was just consistency in what we have now at a minimum.
Yeah.
And so that means, like we've talked about park monuments. Right now we've got every single park monument
has its own.
And it's also
but is that really a good bang for your buck to fix all that?
No. Well, it depends on what we're trying to do. But one thing that I would like to see is at a minimum we need to get Syracuse signs on a lot of our major roadways. The only one that we really have that's different than any other one is we have a wood one on 1000 that could probably use a little bit of remodeling. But when you're coming down Antelope, you have no idea when you enter the city, other than I think there's a little green sign on the side of the road that.
On Gordon, there's a little triangle that lets me know that's where I turn. And that's
So,
the only way I know it's Syracuse, because there's the little.
Back to the branding thing. One of the challenges, for example, we have this tagline, Gateway to Antelope Island. But we don't really use it well.
Yeah,
I mean, it's on a couple of documents. Sometimes we say it, but we don't hit it enough to make it an actual thing. And then the question is, let's say that we went with that. And I'm not saying that we're in that box. I'm just saying, if we go with that box, how are we trying to attract businesses that really enhance the use of the island, or because people have said things like, well, we have 1 million people go out to Antelope Island every year, but the nearest hotel is in Layton. So where are they staying? In Layton. So where are they spending their money? In Layton. So, and I'm not saying we need a hotel per se, but we need to look at the big picture and say, what are the type of things? Maybe bike shop, maybe hiking something, maybe hotel, maybe, what are some...
a hotel close to the West Davis corridor is definitely
a possibility. And maybe that's a target. Maybe that type of thing is a target. But I'm trying to say, what do we do this whole thing? And then what I do think we can capture are what are the little things we can do to start slapping our brand on all these things that we do, so that people start associating a place with who we are.
So I used to think that that's where you started with the signs coming into Syracuse. But now I think you start from the bigger picture. Because if you want to say we're the gateway to Antelope Island, then you're saying we're gonna market as an outdoor type of city, and then we go after a Bass Pro Shop, not a Costco, and the bike shop and all that you're talking about. So I've changed my way of thinking. We got to start big, and then that'll filter down to the things we can afford, like the signs, and what we put on the signs will be determined by that.
Speaking of which, we need a good sign for the island.
And let's say, let's look at the bigger picture as well when it comes to things like what is Antelope Island. is Antelope Island an outdoor place where we hike? Well, sure, but could our connection to it be
Dark sky.
entertainment? Well, no, I mean, we're thinking along that venue, so maybe we're beefing up our arts interest in this community, so there's more things for people to do than just go to the island on their way back through. Maybe they want to stay at our hotel, go to a show. You know, we try to emphasize some of the things that we have a movie theater right here. Maybe they want to stay in. I'm just trying to think of the big picture of what attracts people to start getting these dominoes in there. It's a longer discussion, I know.
Agree, and along the lines of Antelope, what we need to do as well is, if we're gonna sell Antelope, we should also try and push more dark sky stuff in the city, and that creates an idea of, hey, if you go to Syracuse, you can see the sky.
Yeah.
And it's just those types of things we need to start putting in a row to get the big picture.
Connecting all of these pieces so that they start to add up to a vision of how we sell ourselves and brand ourselves.
Great.
So this is the discussion I wanted to breach. I realize it's going to take a lot more work, but that's the kind of brainstorming that I think we get. If you go in, and if we were to go and say, "Oh, tell us who we are," somebody would go, "Okay, let's look at your website." They are, you know, and oh, you're the cattail people, okay?
Well, the visioning group has told us a little bit who we are.
Right.
And
I think it's going to be
what
good.
I'm hearing you say is that maybe you're saying that maybe we can do that ourselves.
Yeah.
Maybe we get a group of residents together and say, let's talk branding.
We need to build on what they're doing there,
Yeah,
and
let's talk
continue.
branding. Because I was surprised at when Noah showed pictures of what the city looked like in housing. I was really surprised.
Well, they went very traditional.
Yeah.
I think you guys need to keep in mind too that you're talking about Bass Pro Shop, but who are your residents? And it's really crucial that you remember their families. They are not your dude who goes out and bikes the whole weekend long. That is a rarity here. It's the dad taking his kids on a bike ride and his wife, and the whole family goes and they go see the spiders which is a terrible idea. But
no, along those
but
lines,
that's
we could say, okay, we're families, and that's been said by the visioning committee.
So if you want to talk about trails and outdoor recreation, do it on the level of families, because
and maybe that's why we beef up
consider
parks.
Park City
And I agree.
a single
Because we are a family.
go out and do that, and yes, parks is huge for us, and you should consider talking to TJ Maxx for a big box store, because
they've got Ross.
Two different things. You don't
I
know
thought
that
they were
because
the
you don't
same.
shop there. I know that. They're two different stores.
I backed off. You noticed that.
What we're talking about here.
Council, I'm going to close.
Okay, that's fine.
We've had a real effective night tonight. We've accomplished a lot. Thank you so much. One of the things that I have learned sitting in this role now for over a year is the effectiveness of the staff in this community. What time did you go to bed last week?
Late.
Last week?
Yeah, last week he was up here till 12:30 most nights because of issues that were going on within his department. We had a baby born, we had a whole bunch of other things, and this visioning thing is kicking his butt. We are understaffed, and our staff is giving us every ounce that we can do. This discussion tonight has been great, been wonderful. Karam, you still there?
I am.
Good night. Let's go home.
We have to officially open it up for public comment. Yeah. Just close it and we're done.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we follow the agenda.
Close. Go.
Thanks, guys.
I'm really glad to check a couple of those things off our list. Even with
Well,